Hello there and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, where curiosity settles in softly and science drifts alongside imagination. Tonight our path isn't measured by clocks or stars, but by currents, shadows and depths. We're leaving behind the familiar daylight seas, the beaches where waves fold gently onto sand, the waters where swimmers splash and fish glimmer just beneath the surface. Instead, we're sinking into the places that few eyes have seen, the deep ocean where sunlight never reaches, where pressure bends steel, and where legends of monsters have lingered for centuries. This is where the giants live, some proven by science, others whispered about in stories told on creaking wooden ships, and a few still waiting in the darkness beyond the reach of our machines. When you imagine the deep ocean at night, do you picture silence? Or does your mind fill in noises that might be there? Have you ever stood on the edge of a pier long after sunset, looking out at black water that hides everything beneath it? It's a strange feeling, knowing that a space so close to you can be so unknowable. Maybe that's why people have always filled the unknown with creatures bigger than whales, hungrier than sharks, stranger than anything we see on land. I wonder, for you, does the thought of the abyss make you feel curious, or does it send a chill along your shoulders? If you find calm in wandering through questions like these, or if you enjoy letting science unravel slowly in the quiet of the evening, I'd be grateful if you gave this little space a like and maybe subscribed. It helps others who might be looking for something steady, a voice to follow while the day softens into rest. And if you want, you can even share where in the world you're listening from tonight. It's a curious thing to talk about the depths of the ocean, while we're each in our own corner of the surface world, connected by a voice and a bit of time. So let's imagine we're beginning to sink, slowly, gently, leaving behind the familiar glow of the surface. Fish scatter as the light dims. The blue gives way to darker shades until it becomes black. No sound of waves now, just the idea of water pressing in from every side. Somewhere below, a giant shape might drift past, something alive that has never been named, and in that moment, you realize how vast this planet truly is. The surface we know is just a thin skin. Beneath it stretches a world deeper and stranger than outer space in many ways. The ocean covers more than 70% of Earth, and yet we've explored less of it than we have the surface of the moon. The abyss, the true deep, begins around 6,000 meters down and stretches to trenches over 11,000 meters deep. At those depths, the pressure is crushing, more than 1,000 times what you feel at sea level. If you tried to dive there without protection, your body wouldn't survive a second. Even our most advanced submarines creak and groan as the water tries to collapse them. And yet, despite those impossible conditions, life thrives. Not just small, fragile organisms, but giants. Creatures with eyes the size of dinner plates, tentacles that can stretch longer than buses, mouths big enough to swallow prey whole. For as long as humans have gone to sea, they've told stories of monsters. Sailors in the ancient Mediterranean spoke of serpents longer than ships. Norse legends told of Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent coiled around the world. Later, whalers described creatures rising from the deep, tentacles wrapping around boats, eyes glowing in the moonlight. To people who spent months at sea where the horizon offered nothing but water, the thought of something vast lurking beneath wasn't just believable, it was inevitable. And though science has explained some of those myths, many remain stubbornly unsolved, tucked away in the dark like the creatures themselves. What makes the deep sea so ripe for these stories is how hidden it is. We can stand on a mountaintop and see for hundreds of miles. We can send telescopes into space and photograph galaxies millions of light years away. But when it comes to the ocean, even a few hundred meters of water blocks our vision completely. Light disappears, sound distorts, and distance loses meaning. You can be only a mile offshore, staring into black water, and there could be a giant squid moving just beneath you, utterly invisible. That hidden quality has always been fertile ground for the imagination. Even today, when submarines and cameras explore deeper than ever before, we only get small glimpses. A flash of movement in front of a lens, a tentacle drifting past, a shadow too large to be identified. For every confirmed giant, like the colossal squid filmed in the Antarctic or the giant jellyfish with a bell wider than a person, there are dozens of unconfirmed sightings, strange shapes captured on sonar, nets pulled up with pieces of tentacles bigger than anything known, sounds recorded in the abyss that don't match any known creature. It's not hard to see why the idea of monsters still lingers, and yet not all of these giants are terrifying. Some drift slowly, fragile but immense, like siphonophores that can stretch longer than blue whales, chains of tiny organisms moving as one. Others are gentle scavengers like giant isopods, which look like oversized pill bugs crawling across the seafloor. There are creatures that glow like lanterns, turning the darkness into an alien light show, and fish with teeth so absurdly large they can barely close their mouths. The abyss doesn't follow our rules of what should or shouldn't exist. It shapes creatures for survival in ways that feel like fiction, but are entirely real. So tonight, we'll move through those depths together. We'll hear the old stories, the myths born of fear and wonder. We'll look at the giants science has proven, from squid to sharks to strange glowing forms. We'll ask whether even larger creatures might still be hiding, just beyond the reach of our technology. And along the way, we'll notice something about ourselves too, about why we create monsters out of shadows, why the unknown pulls at us so powerfully. Already as you listen, you might feel that slow descent, as if the words themselves are pulling you deeper. The surface fades, the pressure builds, and in the distance something vast is moving. Not toward us, not away, just moving, existing, in a place so foreign that even describing it feels like entering another world. And yet this world is part of Earth, part of the same planet we walk on every day. The giants of the abyss are our neighbours, though we rarely think of them. And with that, we're ready to let the descent continue, past the last fading trace of light, toward the first true glimpse of the ocean at midnight. When we think about the ocean at night, it's tempting to imagine something familiar, just darker. Maybe you picture the surface glistening under moonlight, waves moving gently against the shore, the rhythmic crash and retreat of water. But the true ocean at midnight lies far below that surface, in a place where no sunlight can reach at all, not even a glimmer. Down here, the world becomes almost unrecognisable compared to the seas we know. It's a world where darkness is permanent, not a temporary condition waiting for dawn. The animals that live here never see the sun, never experience daylight, and instead survive in conditions so extreme that it almost seems impossible anything could live here at all. The first thing to understand about this zone of the ocean is just how dark it is. Once you descend a few hundred metres, sunlight is already faint. By 1,000 metres, it's gone completely. Imagine standing in the middle of the darkest night you've ever experienced, away from cities and houses, no lamps, no fire, just endless black. That's what it's like permanently in this part of the sea, except instead of air around you, there is water pressing in from every direction. If you've ever swum in a lake at night and felt a small twinge of unease, multiply that by thousands, and you might come close to how alien this darkness feels. But the darkness doesn't mean emptiness. In fact, the deep ocean is alive with creatures, many of which have developed astonishing adaptations to survive without light. Bioluminescence, for example, is common here. That's the ability to produce light from within the body. To us, light is something we associate with outside sources, the sun, a fire, a lamp, a phone screen. But down here, light comes from the bodies of the creatures themselves. Tiny plankton spark like stars. Fish carry glowing lures that dangle in front of their jaws. Jellyfish pulse with ghostly blue and green glimmers. It's not a uniform brightness, but scattered, shifting, unpredictable points of light drifting in the dark. The effect is strange. It's like looking up at the night sky but upside down with the stars around you instead of above you. Why do these creatures glow? For many, it's about survival. Some use light to attract prey. The anglerfish, for example, has a glowing bulb at the end of a stalk that hangs just in front of its mouth. In the blackness, small fish are drawn toward that little flicker, mistaking it for food, only to be swallowed whole by jaws filled with sharp teeth. Others use light for defense. Some deep-sea shrimp can release a cloud of glowing fluid to startle predators, like an underwater version of a smoke bomb. Certain squid can eject bioluminescent ink, confusing attackers and giving themselves time to escape. Still others use it for communication, signalling to potential mates with patterns of flashes. In a place with no sunlight, light becomes as valuable as food itself. But the ocean at midnight isn't just about light and darkness, it's also about pressure. At the surface, the weight of the atmosphere presses on us with about 1 kilogram per square centimetre. We don't feel it because our bodies are adapted to balance it, but for every 10 metres you descend in the ocean, the pressure increases by another atmosphere. By the time you reach 1,000 metres, the pressure is 100 times what it is at the surface. At 4,000 metres it's 400 times. Imagine the weight of hundreds of elephants pressing on every square inch of your body. That's what the creatures down here endure every moment of their lives. How do they survive it? Their bodies are built differently from ours. Many deep-sea creatures don't have air-filled cavities like lungs or swim bladders that would collapse under pressure. Instead, they're made mostly of water and soft tissues that compress without damage. Their cell membranes and proteins are adapted to function under crushing weight. It's an alien biology, one that has evolved not for comfort, but for survival in conditions that would destroy almost anything from the surface. The temperature here is near freezing, usually just a few degrees above zero. Cold, dark, crushing. And yet, life thrives. It's humbling to realise that on a planet where we struggle to survive even small changes in climate, there are entire ecosystems built to endure what seems unendurable. And then there is the scale of the creatures themselves. Many of the giants of the deep live in this perpetual night. The colossal squid, for instance, one of the largest invertebrates on Earth, drifts through these depths with eyes the size of dinner plates, larger than any other animal's eyes. Why so big? Because in a world without sunlight, every trace of light matters. Even the faint glow of bioluminescent prey or the distant silhouette of a predator can be detected by such massive eyes. To the squid, those eyes are survival tools, capable of turning darkness into information. Other giants, like sperm whales, dive into these depths to hunt. They're air-breathing mammals, so they don't live here permanently, but they come down on long dives lasting more than an hour to chase squid. Imagine being in the pitch black as a whale longer than a bus moves silently nearby, its sonar clicks echoing through the water as it searches for prey. For the squid, the whale is the true monster. For us, watching from above, both creatures feel almost mythic, locked in a battle that few humans have ever witnessed directly. It's strange to think that much of this world, this midnight ocean, exists entirely separate from us. Whole ecosystems live and die here without ever touching the surface. Carcasses of whales drift down from above, feeding entire communities of scavengers for decades. Strange worms thrive around hydrothermal vents, where hot mineral-rich water gushes out of the seafloor, supporting life forms that don't even rely on sunlight for energy. Instead, they use chemicals, a process called chemosynthesis, to fuel their existence. For them, the sun might as well not exist. Their world is lit by the faint glow of vent fluids and the occasional bioluminescent creature drifting past. If you imagine yourself in this world, it's easy to feel small. The darkness presses in. The pressure is unimaginable. Every sound carries for miles, distorted and unfamiliar. And somewhere in the distance, something massive might be moving. Something we don't know. Something that may never have been seen by humans. The ocean at midnight isn't empty. It's alive. It's vast. And it's filled with creatures that stretch the limits of what life can be. What's fascinating is that even though we now understand more about this realm than ever before, it still manages to surprise us constantly. Submersibles return with footage of creatures that don't fit into any category we know. Transparent fish with heads you can see through, giant jellyfish with tendrils longer than a football field, sharks that glow in the dark. Every dive into the deep feels like opening a door to a new world, a place where the rules of biology are rewritten in silence. The ocean at midnight has also shaped human imagination in ways we sometimes forget. Writers, filmmakers, and storytellers return again and again to the idea of the abyss as a place of mystery and monsters. Think of the stories of the Kraken dragging ships into the depths. Think of movies where submarines encounter massive creatures hidden in the dark. These aren't just inventions, they're reflections of the real unknown that the deep sea represents. When we look into darkness and can't see what's there, our minds fill it in with giants. And sometimes, the giants turn out to be real. If you stand back and think about it, this part of the world covers more area than all the land on Earth combined, and yet it remains hidden. Most of our daily lives never involve thinking about what's happening thousands of meters below the surface. And yet at this very moment, in the blackness of the deep, colossal creatures are hunting, glowing, drifting, or simply existing in ways we can barely imagine. They live in perpetual midnight, carrying on their lives without ever knowing we're up here, wondering about them. The truth is, the ocean at midnight is not just about monsters, it's about perspective. It reminds us that life isn't limited to the conditions we find comfortable. It reminds us that Earth is still filled with mystery, even in the age of satellites and instant information. And it reminds us that sometimes the most alien landscapes aren't in outer space, but right here beneath our feet, hidden under water so dark and deep that we may never fully know it. And yet, we keep trying. We build stronger submarines. We send cameras deeper. We analyze sounds and images. Each glimpse adds another piece to the puzzle. But the picture is far from complete. And maybe that's what makes it so compelling. The midnight ocean isn't something we can conquer or fully understand. It's something we can only visit, briefly, cautiously, knowing that most of it will remain unknown. But that doesn't stop us from wondering what else is down there. What shapes are moving in the dark right now? What giants are drifting in the silence, too far for our eyes or machines to find? As we leave this thought hanging, the descent continues, and our focus shifts toward the stories people once told of the creatures they believed lived here, the legends born not from science, but from fear and awe. When people hear the phrase the deep sea, they often picture darkness first. Darkness is easy to imagine. We've all been in dark rooms, stepped outside on moonless nights, or closed our eyes and felt what it's like to lose sight completely. But what's harder to picture, what's almost impossible to grasp without numbers and comparisons, is the pressure. Pressure is the invisible weight of the ocean bearing down on everything below, and it increases so quickly that even a short descent changes the rules of survival entirely. If darkness is the most obvious feature of the abyss, then pressure is its most unforgiving one. On land, we live under the weight of Earth's atmosphere. It doesn't feel like anything to us because our bodies are adapted to it, but right now, whether you're sitting or lying down, the air is pressing on every part of you. It's about 1 kilogram per square centimetre, or roughly the weight of a large book resting on every thumbnail-sized patch of your skin. Multiply that across your whole body, and you're carrying the load of an entire car without noticing. That's 1 atmosphere of pressure, what we experience at sea level. Now picture yourself diving beneath the waves. For every 10 metres you descend, the pressure increases by another atmosphere. 10 metres isn't much at all. A trained swimmer can dive that deep without equipment. At that depth, you'd already feel your ears squeeze and your chest tighten. At 30 metres, it's 3 atmospheres. At 100 metres, it's 10. Already the pressure on your body is equivalent to a car stacked on top of you. And yet, for deep-sea creatures, 100 metres is nothing. For them, the real world begins thousands of metres down. At 1,000 meters, where no sunlight reaches, the pressure is about 100 atmospheres. That means every square centimetre of a creature's body is bearing the weight of 100 kilograms. At 4,000 metres, it's 400 atmospheres. By the time you reach the deepest trenches of the ocean, more than 11,000 metres down, it's over 1,000 atmospheres. Imagine standing on the ground with 50 jumbo jets piled on top of you. That's the level of crushing weight that exists in the Hadal zone, the deepest part of the sea. The comparison to suns might sound dramatic, but in terms of raw force, the pressure at the bottom of the ocean is staggering enough to rival the heat and weight we associate with stars. If you dropped a regular submarine into these depths, the hull would buckle and implode almost instantly. If you tried to send an empty soda can, it would crumple into a flat disc. Even large steel barrels collapse under the weight. Human technology can resist it only through extremely careful design. Thick titanium walls, reinforced shapes, and pressure-resistant glass no wider than a dinner plate. And even then, every descent into the deep is a test. Crews of submersibles often report hearing groans, cracks, and the sounds of the ocean trying to crush their vessel into scrap metal. So how do living creatures manage to survive this relentless force? The answer lies in biology that has evolved for millions of years under these conditions. Unlike us, most deep-sea animals don't have air-filled spaces in their bodies. Humans have lungs, sinuses, and cavities that collapse under pressure, but creatures of the abyss are built differently. Their tissues are often soft, gelatinous, and filled with water, which can't be compressed the same way air can. This means the pressure inside their bodies balances with the pressure outside. To them, what would crush us feels normal. That doesn't mean their lives are easy. Their proteins and cell membranes are adapted in ways ours could never be. At surface level, high pressure can cause proteins to lose their shape and stop working, like delicate machines crushed out of alignment. But deep-sea creatures produce special molecules called piezolites that stabilize their proteins, allowing them to function under crushing conditions. Without these molecular adaptations, their cells would fall apart almost instantly. In other words, their survival is written not just in their shape, but in their chemistry. Some fish from the deep look almost ghostly, with transparent skin and bones that would crumble if brought to the surface. When scientists attempt to collect them, often the bodies collapse as they rise, because what holds them together down below is precisely balanced with the immense pressure around them. Remove the pressure and they simply can't exist. It's a reminder that survival is always relative. What seems impossible to us is natural to them, but what feels safe to us is lethal for them. If you've ever seen images of deep-sea amphipods, small crustaceans scuttling across the seafloor, you might be surprised to know that they thrive even at the bottom of trenches. In one famous experiment, scientists lowered traps into the Mariana Trench at nearly 11,000 meters and pulled up amphipods happily feeding in an environment where no human body or machine could last unprotected. These tiny scavengers show that pressure alone doesn't make a place uninhabitable. Life finds a way, but it does so by reshaping itself completely to match the weight of the world around it. Larger giants have evolved to handle the same conditions. Colossal squid, with bodies stretching more than 10 meters long, are believed to spend much of their lives in the deep, their muscles, eyes and organs all functioning under hundreds of atmospheres. Their enormous eyes may help them detect faint glimmers of light in a place where pressure and darkness combine, while their tentacles are adapted to grasp prey in a world where every movement is slowed by the density of the water. Pressure doesn't just shape biology, it shapes behavior too. Many deep-sea creatures move slowly, conserving energy. At high pressures and near-freezing temperatures, chemical reactions in the body are sluggish. Muscles contract more slowly, digestion takes longer, and life proceeds at a different rhythm than we're used to. In fact, some scientists think that deep-sea animals may live much longer than their shallow water relatives because of the reduced pace of life. When you exist under the weight of 1,000 suns, rushing isn't really an option. For humans, the challenge of pressure has always been a barrier to exploration. Early diving suits allowed people to descend only a few dozen meters before the squeeze became unbearable. The invention of pressurized submarines changed the game, but even today, very few people have ever been to the deepest trenches. The first descent to the Challenger Deep, the deepest known point of the ocean, happened in 1960 when Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh piloted the bathyscaphe Trieste into the Hadal zone. They reported seeing strange fish and shrimp moving in the silt, proving life could endure even there. But the trip was brief, and the technology barely held together. Since then, only a handful of people, including filmmaker James Cameron, have returned. Each mission requires millions of dollars, years of preparation, and machines capable of resisting unimaginable force. And yet, for all the technology, the ocean still reminds us who's in charge. In 2014, an experimental submersible imploded during a test dive at a few thousand meters. The vehicle and all its instruments were destroyed in an instant, leaving behind little more than scattered fragments. The crew wasn't inside, but the loss was a stark reminder of how unforgiving the abyss is. Pressure is not just an environmental condition, it's an active force waiting to punish mistakes. But there's another way to look at it. Pressure is also a sculptor. It shapes the giants of the deep, carving their forms and behaviours. Without pressure, there would be no colossal squid as we know it, no jellyfish spreading like parachutes in slow motion, no strange transparent fish with eyes pointed upward. Pressure has created a theatre where life experiments with forms that would be impossible in shallower waters. It also changes how we think about monsters. When sailors told stories of giant creatures rising from the depths, they weren't just describing size, they were describing the awe of something that lives where humans cannot. The idea of monsters isn't only about teeth and tentacles, it's about survival in conditions that seem hostile to existence itself. For humans, pressure that can crush a submarine feels like death. For deep-sea creatures, it feels like home. That difference alone is enough to turn them into monsters in our minds. When we send down cameras and lights, we intrude on a world where pressure rules. Often, the creatures we film look slow and almost fragile, their movements drifting, their bodies soft. But the truth is they are adapted perfectly. It's we who would be destroyed in an instant if we tried to join them. Their strangeness is not weakness, but mastery of an environment that resists every other form of life. Thinking about pressure also raises questions about what we haven't yet found. If small amphipods can live at 11,000 meters, and squid can grow to enormous sizes in the deep, what other giants might be lurking just out of reach? Could there be creatures so perfectly adapted to the abyss that they never need to rise, never encounter our machines, never appear in our nets? The pressure would shield them from us, making the abyss a kind of sanctuary where unknown giants remain hidden. We sometimes think of the deep sea as empty because we can't easily visit it, but pressure makes it clear that emptiness is only an illusion. In reality, this crushing environment is filled with life, just not life that looks familiar. And every time we discover a new creature, we're reminded that the rules of survival are flexible. On land, we need air. In shallow water, we need sunlight. In the abyss, you need to withstand the weight of an entire world pressing down. Different rules, different monsters. As we sink deeper into this thought, it becomes clear that pressure is more than just a scientific fact. It's part of the story of why the deep sea feels so alien to us. It's part of why myths of monsters feel so believable. It's part of why, even today, we wonder what could still be hiding down there. If life has conquered the pressure of 1,000 suns, then perhaps life has taken forms we can't even imagine. Giants that make our known creatures look small, being so well adapted to the crushing dark that they'll never surface for us to see. And so the story continues, with pressure surrounding every detail, shaping every creature, defining every survival strategy. But pressure alone doesn't explain why humans began to imagine these giants long before submarines and cameras existed. For that, we need to look not only at the science, but at the stories told by those who first braved the seas, the sailors who stared into the waves and saw shapes moving below, giving birth to legends that still echo today. When people first began to cross oceans, they entered a world with no markers, no signposts, nothing but endless water stretching to the horizon. Days could pass without land in sight, and at night, the surface of the sea became a black mirror that reflected only the stars. It was in this setting, far from the safety of land, that the earlier stories of sea monsters were born. You can almost imagine sailors gathering on the deck of a ship, the timbers creaking, the waves slapping against the hull, and someone pointing into the darkness to say they saw something move. Whether it was a real creature, a shadow, or simply imagination doesn't matter. The story would spread, and with each telling, it would grow larger, stranger, more terrifying, until it became part of the lore of the ocean. The sea has always been a place of both opportunity and fear. For ancient people, it offered food, trade, exploration, and even a path to new lands. But it also carried storms, shipwrecks, and the unknown. Without modern maps, without engines, and without technology to see beneath the waves, the ocean was unpredictable. That unpredictability gave rise to myths of creatures that could explain what otherwise had no explanation. If a ship vanished, perhaps it wasn't just bad weather. Maybe it had been dragged down by a monster. If strange shapes appeared floating on the surface, perhaps they were the backs of serpents or the shells of enormous turtles. In the Mediterranean, Greek sailors told stories of Scylla and Charybdis. One a many-headed monster that devoured men from ships, the other a whirlpool that swallowed vessels whole. Together they represented the dangers of passing through narrow straits, where rocks and currents could smash a boat to pieces. For the sailors of the time, those hazards were real, and monsters became the way to explain them. In Norse mythology, the great serpent Jörmungandr was said to encircle the entire world, lying beneath the seas and waiting for the day it would rise to bring about the end times. To imagine a serpent so vast that its body wrapped around the earth was terrifying. But to sailors who saw enormous whales or the long ridges of waves stretching across the horizon, it might not have felt completely impossible. Farther east, in Japanese folklore, there were stories of umibozu, a sea spirit that appeared on calm nights to capsize ships. Sometimes described as a dark, human-shaped figure rising from the water, it embodied the sudden shift from peace to disaster that sailors knew all too well. In Polynesian traditions, tales of giant fish and sea gods filled oral histories, often linked to navigation and the power of the waves themselves. Every culture with a coastline developed its own version of sea monsters, shaped by the particular dangers they faced and the creatures they saw. But myths weren't only born from fear. Sometimes they were born from encounters with real animals that seemed too extraordinary to explain. Consider the giant squid. For centuries, stories of enormous tentacled creatures circulated among sailors. They spoke of krakens that could wrap around ships, pulling them under with ease. These stories were dismissed by many as exaggeration, but they persisted, especially in northern Europe, where fishing boats occasionally pulled up long tentacles or strange rubbery remains. Without the knowledge we have today, those fragments were enough to confirm the existence of something vast and mysterious. When whales became more commonly hunted in the 17th and 18th centuries, encounters with giant squid became more frequent, because the two species often fought in the deep. Sailors described seeing scars on the heads of sperm whales, circular marks left by the suckers of enormous squid. Some even reported seeing the two creatures locked in battle at the surface, a whale thrashing while tentacles wrapped around its body. To anyone watching, it must have seemed like a clash of titans, and those scenes fed the legend of the kraken until it became one of the most enduring sea monsters in human imagination. Other myths may have started with glimpses of creatures like oarfish. These long ribbon-like fish can reach lengths of 10 meters and move with an undulating motion that makes them look like serpents gliding just beneath the surface. For sailors who spotted them rising during storms or washing ashore after earthquakes, the connection to sea serpents was inevitable. Even today, when an oarfish appears near shore, local myths are revived, with some communities interpreting the sight as a warning of natural disasters. The legend of the Leviathan, described in biblical texts, may also have drawn on real encounters with giant whales or other massive sea creatures. To people who had never seen such animals before, the sheer size and power of a whale breaching the surface would have looked like a monster erupting from the deep. Add in the spouts of water from their blowholes, the booming sound of their tails hitting the waves, and the ability of a whale to disappear as suddenly as it appeared, and you have all the ingredients for myth. Even the phenomenon of rogue waves, which we now know are rare but real walls of water created by complex interactions of wind and current, could have inspired legends. Imagine being on a wooden sailing ship, seeing a wave rise higher than anything you've ever witnessed, crashing down and swallowing vessels whole. Without science to explain it, the simplest answer was that a monster had risen from the sea. What makes these legends compelling is not just that they reflect fear of the unknown, but that they persist across cultures. From Norse krakens to Pacific sea gods, from Mediterranean monsters to Asian spirits, nearly every seafaring people develops stories of giants lurking beneath the waves. It suggests that the ocean itself, by its very nature, invites us to imagine. When you stand on the deck of a ship and look out at endless water, it's easy to believe that anything could be hiding below. As centuries passed and exploration expanded, the stories evolved. In the age of exploration, when European ships began sailing to new continents, sailors brought back tales of creatures from distant seas. Maps from the 16th century often depicted monsters alongside coastlines, drawn as dragons, serpents, or fish with human faces. These illustrations weren't just decoration. They reflected real fears and uncertainties about what might be encountered. To chart a blank space on a map was to admit ignorance, and so artists filled it with monsters. In a way, the creatures served as warnings. Here be dragons. It's worth remembering that for most of history, the ocean wasn't a place people could observe easily. Without scuba gear, submersibles, or underwater cameras, everything beneath the surface was hidden. The ocean was a two-dimensional world. Flat above, unknown below. Any creature that rose from the depths was shocking, whether it was a whale, a shark, or something stranger. And every sighting, every half-glimpsed shape, had the potential to become a legend. These stories also served a social function. They reminded sailors of the dangers of the sea, kept listeners attentive during long nights on watch, and passed down knowledge in the form of warnings. A tale of a monster might really be a way of saying, beware this stretch of water where storms come quickly, or beware the strait where currents can drag a ship into rocks. In that sense, monsters were not just entertainment, they were tools of survival, cloaked in myth. Even today, we're not entirely free from these legends. Modern movies and books continue to draw on the imagery of giant sea creatures. From novels like Moby Dick to films featuring colossal squid or fictional leviathans, the deep remains fertile ground for our imaginations. The difference is that now we mix myth with science, layering real discoveries onto the old stories. When a giant squid was finally filmed alive for the first time in 2004, it felt like a legend stepping into reality. What sailors once described in fear could now be shown on camera, proof that some monsters are real, even if they aren't exactly as we pictured them. The persistence of these legends raises a question. Why do humans need monsters in the first place? Perhaps it's because monsters give shape to the unknown. When something is too vast, too dark, or too complex to understand, we personify it. We make it into something with eyes, tentacles, and hunger, because that makes it easier to imagine. A shapeless unknown is hard to think about, but a giant serpent or squid is concrete, something we can tell stories about, something we can fear, respect, or even admire. And maybe that's why, even as science progresses, we still find ourselves drawn to the idea of undiscovered giants in the ocean. The old legends remind us that the sea has always been more than just water. It's been a stage for the imagination, a mirror for human hopes and fears, and a reminder that the world is never fully known. Every wave that rises and falls carries the possibility of something vast beneath it, and that possibility is enough to keep the legends alive. As we drift forward from these stories of the past, it's worth asking what happened when those legends collided with reality. When sailors claimed to see enormous tentacles or monstrous shapes in the water, what were they really seeing? Were they glimpses of real creatures, like squid and whales, or were they something else entirely? To answer that, we need to look at the first recorded sightings, the moments when myths stepped into history and the ocean revealed just enough to leave us both certain and uncertain about what truly lurks beneath. When we move from the world of legend into the realm of history, the line between myth and observation doesn't disappear, but it becomes more textured. The ocean has always been a stage where human imagination and reality overlap, and the earliest sightings of giants from the deep often look like both at once. Sailors wrote down what they saw, naturalists tried to interpret it, and skeptics dismissed much of it as exaggeration. Yet again and again, people kept reporting enormous creatures in the water, creatures that didn't fit with the animals they already knew. These first sightings are fascinating because they capture a moment in time when human beings were just beginning to record what had always been whispers on the waves. Some of the earliest accounts we've come from the Mediterranean. Aristotle, writing in the 4th century BCE, described large cephalopods, noting differences between the octopus and the squid. His descriptions were surprisingly accurate for the time, pointing out the structure of the arms, the way the animals moved, and even the behaviour of using ink to escape. But he also referred to giant versions, creatures far larger than what anyone could usually see near the shore. Whether these were true observations or second-hand accounts from fishermen who hauled up strange remains, it shows that even in antiquity people knew there were cephalopods that grew to unusual sizes. Pliny the Elder, writing a few centuries later, offered more elaborate descriptions. He told of a squid captured in Roman waters with arms 30 feet long, so large it supposedly attacked fishermen's boats. His accounts, preserved in the Natural History, mix clear observations with stories that sound almost unbelievable. But again, they show that the idea of monstrous squid wasn't just myth. Real animals were occasionally encountered, and those encounters left strong impressions. As seafaring expanded in the Middle Ages, reports became more common. Norse sagas from the 13th century describe encounters with the kraken not just as legend but as something sailors expected to encounter. These weren't written as fairy tales. They were written as hazards of the sea, warnings about areas where strange disturbances might appear. Some sagas describe the kraken as so large it could be mistaken for an island, with sailors landing on its back only to discover too late that it was alive. While this sounds fantastical, it may have been inspired by real encounters with whales, which sometimes float at the surface for long periods. To a sailor unfamiliar with such creatures, an enormous, motionless back could easily be mistaken for land. As European exploration pushed outward into the Atlantic and beyond, sailors began writing logs that included references to strange creatures. In 1187, an account from Norway described a sea monster many horn lengths long, with eyes like round plates. The description is vague, but when read alongside later accounts, it echoes the idea of large squids surfacing or being spotted in shallow waters. By the 16th and 17th centuries, with more ships at sea than ever before, sightings multiplied. The age of exploration brought back reports not only of new lands but of unfamiliar animals, many of which sounded monstrous to Europeans. Sailors returning from long voyages told of serpents in the Atlantic, enormous fish off the coast of Africa, and creatures with tentacles that writhed just below the surface. Some of these were likely exaggerations, but others line up with what we now know about the distribution of large marine life. Oarfish, giant squid, and basking sharks were all occasionally encountered, and all could easily be described as monsters by those who had never seen them before. One of the most famous early sightings was recorded by Bishop Erik Pontoppidan of Bergen, Norway, in the 18th century. In his Natural History of Norway, published in 1752, he described the kraken in detail, noting that fishermen considered it real and that its appearance was taken seriously. He described it as being so large it could be mistaken for a floating island, and he even included the idea that the kraken would create dangerous whirlpools as it submerged. Pontoppidan tried to blend scientific observation with local testimony, but his writing helped cement the kraken in European imagination as something halfway between myth and biology. Around the same time, whalers were reporting battles with giant squid. Though much of the squid's life is spent in the deep, they sometimes float to the surface when injured, or when fighting whales. Fishermen occasionally hauled up pieces of tentacles that were too large to belong to any known species. These fragments provided physical evidence, though incomplete, that something vast was living below. Stories spread quickly through port towns, and naturalists began to wonder whether there really was an undiscovered giant squid roaming the depths. In 1857, Danish naturalist Peter Steenstrup analysed beached remains of a large cephalopod and formally described the giant squid, giving it the name Architeuthis. This was a turning point. What had once been legend became recognised as a real animal. From then on, reports of giant squid were no longer dismissed entirely. Instead, they were collected as evidence of a species too elusive to study easily. Newspapers published sensational accounts of fishermen battling giant tentacled beasts, feeding the public's appetite for monsters while also pointing toward genuine zoological discoveries. But sightings weren't limited to squid. Sea serpents continued to appear in reports well into the 19th century. In 1848, the crew of HMS Daedalus, a British warship, reported seeing a long serpent-like creature with a mane swimming with undulations about 200 feet from the ship. The officers and captain all signed the report, lending it credibility. Newspapers spread the story widely, and for decades afterward, people debated what the crew had seen. Some suggested it was an oarfish, others a misidentified whale, and still others argued it was evidence of an undiscovered giant reptile. The fact that experienced naval officers vouched for the sighting kept it alive in the public imagination, and even today it remains one of the most famous sea serpent accounts. There were many others. In New England, fishermen spoke of serpents in Gloucester Harbour in the early 19th century, with hundreds of people claiming to have seen them. In Scotland, long before Nessie became a local celebrity, there were reports of waterhorses and serpents along the coasts. Each sighting added another layer to the tradition of monsters lurking just offshore, always glimpsed but never captured. What unites these early sightings is the mixture of fear, awe and uncertainty. The ocean was vast, the creatures unfamiliar, and human imagination filled in the gaps. Some sightings were clearly rooted in real animals. Others may have been illusions caused by waves, floating debris, or the play of light. But together, they built a picture of the sea as a place where monsters were not only possible but expected. It's also important to consider the context. For much of history, sailors were ordinary people with little formal education, but they were also careful observers. Their survival depended on noticing changes in weather, currents, and animal behaviour. When they described something unusual, it wasn't always out of superstition. They were reporting what they saw, even if they lacked the scientific language to describe it precisely. A whale might become a leviathan, a squid a kraken, a serpent an oarfish. The descriptions may sound exaggerated, but at their core they were rooted in genuine encounters. As science advanced, skepticism grew, but so did curiosity. Naturalists began collecting testimonies, trying to separate fact from fiction. Some were too quick to dismiss, labelling every sighting as fantasy. Others leaned too far the other way, embracing every report as proof of undiscovered monsters. The truth, as always, lay somewhere between. Many sightings were mistakes or exaggerations, but some pointed directly to real animals that had not yet been studied properly. This is what makes the first sightings so compelling today. They are windows into the moment when humans were beginning to piece together the reality of deep-sea giants. They remind us that behind every myth there may be a kernel of truth, and behind every story of a monster there may be an animal stranger and more extraordinary than anyone expected. As we look back at these early accounts, it's clear that they set the stage for everything that followed. Once the world accepted that giant squid were real, the door opened for other possibilities. If one monster of the deep existed, why not others? If sailors had been right about tentacled beasts, maybe they were right about serpents, leviathans, and other creatures too. The ocean remained vast and unexplored, and every new sighting kept curiosity alive. And that curiosity carries us forward, from the scattered reports of sailors and naturalists to the more specific creatures that science has since confirmed. Among them are the tentacled giants themselves, colossal squid and giant squid, animals that once lived only in the imagination but now stand as proof that some of the old stories were closer to reality than anyone thought. When people think of sea monsters, the image that most often rises is not of a serpent or a whale, but of something with tentacles. There's something about arms stretching out from the darkness, covered in suckers, coiling and pulling, that strikes a deep chord in human imagination. Maybe it's because tentacles are so different from the limbs we know. They bend in every direction, they grab and hold with strength far greater than we expect, and they seem both alien and alive in ways that are hard to pin down. For centuries, the stories of tentacled giants were treated as myths, exaggerations passed around by sailors, but slowly, evidence began to pile up that such creatures were not only real, but among the largest and strangest animals on Earth. The giant squid and the colossal squid are the most famous of these deep-sea giants, though they are far from the only tentacled creatures in the abyss. Both belong to a group of animals called cephalopods, which includes octopuses, cuttlefish, and smaller squid. Cephalopods are remarkable in many ways. They are intelligent, adaptable, and built for survival. They have beaks like parrots, arms lined with suckers, and the ability to change colour and texture in the blink of an eye. On land, the closest thing we have to them might be cats or primates, but in the ocean, they follow rules of their own. The giant squid, Architeuthis dux, is legendary. For centuries it was known only from fragments, tentacles washed ashore, beaks found in the stomachs of whales, and scars on whale skin left by enormous suckers. Sailors told stories of squid attacking ships, pulling men overboard, and wrapping vessels in coils as thick as tree trunks. Scientists dismissed much of this as exaggeration, but the fragments could not be ignored. Something huge was living in the deep. Descriptions of giant squid vary, but specimens brought to shore have measured over 10 meters in length, with some estimates stretching even farther. Their bodies are long and muscular, with two main feeding tentacles that extend far beyond the others. These tentacles end in clubs lined with suckers and sometimes hooks, which they use to grasp prey. Their eyes are among the largest of any creature on Earth, as big as basketballs, capable of detecting the faintest glimmer of light in the abyss. Imagine living in a world of total darkness, where survival depends on seeing just a shadow, just a flicker. For the squid, those massive eyes are not excess. They are tools of life and death. The colossal squid, Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni, is even stranger. While the giant squid is longer overall, the colossal squid is heavier, bulkier, and equipped with rotating hooks on its tentacles. Very few have ever been captured or even seen, but those that have suggest an animal of immense strength. The first major specimen was brought up accidentally by a fishing vessel near Antarctica in 2007. It measured over 4 meters long just in body, with tentacles extending far beyond, and weighed nearly half a ton. Its hooks set it apart from the giant squid, suggesting it is a formidable predator in its own right, adapted for hunting large fish, and perhaps even defending itself against whales. What makes these squid so compelling is not only their size, but their elusiveness. Despite centuries of stories, it wasn't until 2004 that scientists managed to photograph a giant squid alive in its natural habitat, and not until 2012 that one was filmed in video. The reason is simple: they live far below the surface, in zones where sunlight never penetrates, and they are not drawn to human vessels. They exist in the margins of our reach, surfacing only rarely, and often only when they are dead or dying. To see one alive swimming in its own environment is to glimpse a living legend. The relationship between giant squid and sperm whales is one of the great dramas of the deep. Sperm whales are among the deepest diving mammals, capable of descending more than 1 kilometre in search of prey. Their primary target? Squid. Not small squid, but giants. The evidence is written on their bodies. Many sperm whales return to the surface with scars, long circular imprints where the suction cups of a giant squid gripped their skin. In some cases, the marks are as wide as dinner plates. These scars prove that encounters between whale and squid are not gentle meals but violent battles. In the darkness, a whale weighing dozens of tons hunts a squid with arms stretching longer than a person, and the struggle leaves permanent marks. Sailors who saw these scars knew that whatever left them had to be enormous. To picture such a battle is to realise why legends of the Kraken took root. A whale thrashing at the surface, tangled in tentacles, could easily be mistaken for a monster dragging the ship itself under. The truth may be that squid rarely attack humans at all, but the imagery of tentacles rising from the deep was too vivid to ignore. It became part of folklore, literature, and eventually modern culture, where the Kraken appears in everything from novels to movies to video games. Yet behind all of that is a real animal, one that science is still only beginning to understand. Squid are not the only tentacled giants in the sea. Octopuses, though usually smaller, can reach impressive sizes. The largest known species, the giant Pacific octopus, can spread its arms more than 4 meters across and weigh over 50 kilograms. While not as large as the deep-sea squid, it is still a formidable creature, capable of remarkable intelligence. Octopuses have been observed opening jars, solving mazes, and even escaping from aquariums. Their bodies are soft, lacking bones, which allows them to squeeze through openings far smaller than expected. In the deep sea, this flexibility would be an advantage, letting them hide in crevices and ambush prey. What unites all these tentacled creatures is their strangeness. To us, they are as alien as anything on Earth. Their limbs move with independent strength. Their nervous systems are distributed, with neurons not only in their brains but in their arms. In some sense, each arm can think for itself, making decisions about movement and grip without waiting for signals from the central brain. This distributed intelligence makes them unlike any vertebrate. For centuries, humans saw them as monsters because they defied our expectations of what an animal should be. Even now, scientists study them with a mix of admiration and puzzlement. The thought that such creatures can grow to enormous sizes adds another layer of fascination. If a squid can reach 10 meters, could one reach 20? If a colossal squid can weigh half a ton, could one weigh a ton? The ocean is vast and much of it remains unexplored. It's not impossible that individuals larger than any we've yet measured are still out there, moving through the darkness where no camera has gone. That uncertainty keeps the sense of mystery alive. For humans, the idea of giants with tentacles touches something deep in our imagination. Tentacles suggest grasping, pulling, entangling, things that rob us of control. In myths, monsters with tentacles often symbolize forces we can't fight directly, but in reality the squid and octopuses of the deep are simply animals, surviving as best they can in an environment of pressure and dark. Their size is not meant to frighten us. It's a result of evolution, shaped by the challenges of the abyss. Still, it's hard not to feel awe when considering them. Somewhere right now, a colossal squid might be drifting through Antarctic waters, its tentacles coiling and uncoiling in the black. A sperm whale might be hunting it, diving deeper with every pulse of its tail, sonar clicks filling the silence. The battle might already be happening, unseen, while we sit here imagining it. That's the strange beauty of these creatures. They exist whether we witness them or not, carrying on lives that intersect with ours only rarely. The first time a giant squid was filmed alive, scientists described the moment with a mix of shock and wonder. The animal glided silently, its arms trailing, its eye reflecting the camera's light. It was neither attacking nor fleeing, simply existing. In that instant, all the stories of the kraken, all the myths of monsters, seemed to fade into the reality of a living animal. The truth was just as incredible as the legend, maybe even more so because it was real. The giants with tentacles remind us that the ocean still holds secrets, that not everything has been measured, and that sometimes the things we once thought were myths turn out to be true. They also remind us that monsters don't have to be villains. They can be neighbours, remarkable creatures sharing this planet with us, shaped by the same forces of survival and adaptation that shaped us. And as we leave the image of these tentacled giants behind, we find ourselves wondering what it must be like to live in that darkness, to see with eyes larger than a person's head, to feel the world through arms that sense and think on their own. It leads naturally to the question of vision itself, and how creatures of the deep manage to perceive anything at all in a world without sunlight. When you imagine living in the deep ocean, it's natural to wonder how anything can see at all. Down where sunlight never reaches, where day and night have no meaning, vision as we know it seems almost pointless. Yet many of the giants and smaller creatures of the abyss have eyes that are not only functional, but extraordinary. Some are among the largest in the animal kingdom, while others are tuned to detect glimmers of light so faint that we could never perceive them. In a world where darkness is the rule, sight becomes both a mystery and a survival tool, and it tells us a lot about how life adapts when stripped of light. At the surface, eyes are built to deal with abundance. Too much light can blind us, so our pupils contract. Bright colours flood the world around us, and our retinas are packed with cone cells that detect wavelengths and let us distinguish reds from greens, blues from yellows. But in the deep sea, none of that matters. There is no sunlight, no spectrum of colours, no shadows cast by objects above. The only light comes from bioluminescence, flashes, glows, pulses created by animals themselves. It's faint, brief, and often blue-green, because that wavelength travels farthest through water. To survive here, creatures have evolved eyes that can make the most of even the tiniest photon. The giant squid is a perfect example. Its eyes are the largest of any animal, measuring up to 30 centimetres across. That's bigger than a dinner plate, larger even than the eyes of a whale. Why such enormous eyes? It's not vanity, of course. It's survival. With such huge lenses and retinas, the squid can detect the faint glow of bioluminescent plankton stirred by a passing predator, or the silhouette of a whale in the darkness. Every hint of movement could mean danger or opportunity. In an environment where encounters are rare and fleeting, being able to see them first can make the difference between life and death. Think about what it means to have eyes that big. Imagine holding a basketball to your face and realizing that, for a squid, that's just one of its eyes. The surface area of its retina captures more light, the way a satellite dish collects faint signals from space. Where our eyes would register nothing, the squid's eye can pick up the faintest shimmer. It's like being able to see a single candle flickering miles away across a dark plain. That ability changes everything about how the animal hunts, avoids predators, and moves through its world. Other creatures take different approaches. Some fish, like the barrelii, have eyes that are tubular and pointed upward, locked in place to catch faint silhouettes against the tiny bit of residual light filtering from above. The barrelii even has a transparent head dome, which allows its eyes to move within while being protected, giving it a bizarre alien appearance. For decades, scientists were baffled by this fish, until submersibles finally filmed it alive and showed how its eyes swivel inside its head to follow prey. This adaptation is perfect for a world where most food comes from above, drifting down as marine snow or as smaller creatures descending from higher waters. Then there are the creatures that don't rely solely on vision, but combine it with bioluminescence. The anglerfish, for example, carries a lure that glows at the tip of a stalk on its forehead. In the blackness, small fish mistake the light for food and swim closer, only to be swallowed whole. The anglerfish's own eyes are relatively small, but they are adapted to pick up that faint glow and the movement of prey around it. In this case, light is not just something to detect, it's something to control. A weapon and a tool wrapped into one. Some shrimp and other crustaceans have eyes that can see ultraviolet light, invisible to us. Others have compound eyes that maximize sensitivity, turning faint signals into usable information. There are even creatures that essentially see movement rather than shape, detecting shifts in bioluminescent fields rather than the animals themselves. Imagine walking through a world where you can't see trees or rocks, but can see ripples of disturbed air whenever something passes by. That's how some deep-sea animals navigate. What's striking is that not all deep-sea creatures invest heavily in vision. Some, like certain species of eels, have tiny or even vestigial eyes, barely functional. For them, sight is less important than smell, touch, or sensitivity to vibrations. In the abyss, energy is precious. Large eyes take resources to grow and maintain. If a species can survive without them, evolution may reduce them over time. It's a reminder that survival isn't about maximizing every sense, but about balancing them for the specific challenges of the environment. Still, the creatures that do rely on sight have pushed it to extremes. In 2010, scientists studying deep-sea dragonfish discovered that their eyes are sensitive to red light. Most bioluminescence in the ocean is blue-green, but dragonfish produce their own red glow. To other animals, it's invisible, but to dragonfish, it's a private flashlight, a way to see prey without being seen themselves. Imagine having a secret wavelength of light that only you can see, making the world reveal itself while keeping you hidden. It's like wearing night vision goggles in a world where everyone else is blind. These adaptations reveal something important about how life evolves under pressure and darkness. Vision doesn't disappear just because light is scarce. Instead, it transforms, it stretches, adapts, and specializes in ways that seem almost like science fiction. When people first saw photographs of a giant squid's eye, the scale seemed unreal, as if nature had exaggerated too far. But the more we learn, the more we see that these are not exaggerations. They are solutions to a problem: how to see in a world where there is almost nothing to see. It also changes how we think about monsters. To sailors who glimpsed a massive eye staring up from the water, the effect must have been terrifying. A human eye is familiar, easy to understand, but an eye the size of a shield, glowing faintly in the dark, is something else entirely. It feels like staring into the gaze of a myth. The reality is less dramatic. The squid isn't a demon, just an animal adapted to survive. But the impression is powerful, and impressions are what feed stories. Even for scientists today, encountering these eyes is unsettling. In 2007, when the colossal squid was brought aboard a New Zealand fishing vessel, its eyes astonished the researchers. They were larger than any they had seen before, with structures designed to maximize light capture. To look into those eyes was to look into a kind of evolutionary perfection, honed for a world we can barely imagine. And it's not just the giants. Small creatures of the deep have eyes that defy expectations too. Some copepods, tiny as they are, have single, simple eyes that still manage to track light sources in the abyss. Others use reflective layers, like mirrors, to amplify what little light there is. The variety of solutions shows that vision, in one form or another, remains valuable even in places where humans assume it would be useless. What's remarkable is how much of this we've only learned recently. For centuries we thought of the deep as blind, a place where creatures either groped in darkness or didn't need sight at all. Only with submersibles, cameras and careful observation have we discovered the diversity of visual adaptations, and with each discovery, the deep becomes stranger, more alive, and less like the empty void we once imagined. There's also the matter of how vision shapes behaviour. A giant squid detecting the faint glow of plankton disturbed by a whale may respond by jetting away. An anglerfish using its lure may wait motionless, conserving energy until a shadow moves just close enough. A dragonfish, with its secret red light, may hunt boldly, knowing it has an invisible advantage. In the abyss, vision isn't just about seeing, it's about strategy, about tipping the balance in a place where resources are scarce and survival is never guaranteed. For humans, all of this is a reminder of how limited our own senses are. We like to think of ourselves as seeing clearly, but in truth, our vision is just one narrow band of possibility. To a deep-sea creature, our eyes would be laughably inadequate. We would be blind to the signals that guide their lives, and perhaps that's why the ocean still feels so mysterious to us. We are trying to peer into a world with senses that don't belong there. Yet despite our limitations, we keep trying. Cameras are built with extreme light sensitivity. Submersibles are equipped with red lights invisible to most deep-sea animals, allowing us to film them without disturbing their natural behaviour. With every new descent, we catch glimpses of eyes glowing back at us, reminders that the deep is not empty but full of watchers, each adapted to a darkness that never ends. And so, when we think of the deep sea as a place of monsters, it's worth pausing to consider that sometimes the most unsettling feature isn't teeth or tentacles, but eyes. Eyes that stare back from the blackness, larger than any we've ever seen, adapted to a reality we can barely comprehend. To meet such a gaze is to understand, if only for a moment, what it feels like to live in a world where light is not given but earned, where seeing is not easy but precious. As we leave this thought, the story doesn't stop. The creatures of the abyss have more than eyes. They have mouths, jaws, and teeth, built to handle prey in a world where meals are rare and must be seized completely. From vision, our attention drifts naturally to the feeding strategies of the deep, to the gulper eels, anglerfish, and fang-toothed predators with mouths that look as if they could swallow ships whole. When sailors told stories of monsters from the deep, they often described enormous mouths, gaping jaws filled with teeth sharp enough to tear through wood and flesh alike. It's not surprising that mouths became the focus of so many tales. In the ocean, where survival often depends on grabbing food before it drifts away, mouths are more than just tools for eating. They are weapons, traps, and sometimes the most visible and terrifying feature of a creature. To humans looking down into the dark, a mouth opening wide beneath the waves must have seemed like the ocean itself trying to swallow them whole. The reality of mouths in the deep sea is just as fascinating, and in many cases just as unsettling. Because food is scarce in the abyss, creatures cannot afford to be picky or delicate. They need to seize every opportunity, and their jaws reflect that necessity. The gulper eel is one of the strangest examples. Its body is thin and whip-like, but its mouth is massive, stretching wider than its own body. When fully opened, it looks like a ballooning sack, capable of engulfing prey much larger than the eel itself. This adaptation allows it to eat almost anything it encounters, from small fish to invertebrates drifting in the current. In an environment where meals are rare, the gulper eel's mouth is not just an advantage, it's a survival strategy. Imagine swimming in complete darkness, when suddenly an enormous mouth opens in front of you, larger than the creature's body, and swallows you whole. For smaller animals, there is no warning, no escape. For humans who have seen gulper eels on camera, the first reaction is often disbelief. How can a creature so slender open its jaws so wide? But that's the nature of deep-sea life. Flexibility and strangeness replace the rules we expect. Another terrifying design belongs to the anglerfish. Famous for its glowing lure, the anglerfish has a mouth filled with long, needle-like teeth that curve inward. Once prey swims close enough, drawn by the lure, the fish snaps its jaws shut, and the teeth prevent anything from escaping. The teeth are often so large that the fish cannot fully close its mouth, giving it a permanent grimace. Yet this isn't a flaw. In fact, it's perfect for the deep. The anglerfish doesn't need to bite its prey into pieces. It swallows it whole, letting the stomach do the rest. Its flexible body and expandable belly mean it can devour animals nearly its own size. In a world where the next meal might be weeks away, being able to eat something massive in one gulp is a matter of survival. Then there is the fang-tooth fish, a small but fearsome predator. Despite being only about 16 centimeters long, it has teeth so disproportionately large that they look absurd, like something drawn in a comic. Its lower fangs are so long they would pierce the roof of its mouth if not for special sockets to hold them. The fangtooth's jaws are designed to snap shut with incredible speed, ensuring that any prey crossing its path is caught instantly. While not a giant by size, the fangtooth represents the extreme solutions evolution can create. In photographs, it looks monstrous, with bulging eyes and a mouth that seems too large for its body, but in the abyss, it's simply efficient. Even larger predators, like the viperfish, share this strategy. The viperfish's mouth is lined with curved, needle-like teeth that are among the longest relative to body size in the animal kingdom. It uses its bioluminescent lure to attract prey, then lunges with jaws that hinge wide enough to engulf creatures nearly half its size. The speed and violence of the attack are startling. Cameras capturing viperfish in action reveal a creature that seems almost mechanical in its precision, snapping forward like a spring-loaded trap. Some of the most haunting mouths belong to deep-sea dragonfish. These slender predators have translucent teeth, which are nearly invisible in the darkness. To prey, there is no warning glint, no flash of enamel reflecting light. The dragonfish simply opens its mouth, and the teeth appear like invisible daggers, impaling anything unlucky enough to drift close. Dragonfish also possess extendable jaws, allowing them to take in prey larger than expected. Again, the theme repeats. In the deep, when food appears, you must take it no matter the size. Even sharks, familiar to us from shallower waters, take on different forms in the abyss. The goblin shark is one of the most bizarre examples. Its jaws are not fixed the way most shark jaws are. Instead, they can protrude forward dramatically, snapping outward like a set of mechanical arms. When the goblin shark lunges at prey, its entire jaw launches from its skull, grabs the target, and then retracts back into place. Watching it on film feels surreal, like watching a creature from another world. Its long snout, pale pink skin, and protruding jaws give it a ghostly appearance. One that surely would have fueled sea monster stories if earlier sailors had ever encountered it. The frilled shark, another deep-sea predator, has a mouth filled with rows of backward-facing teeth, each one shaped like a trident. With more than 300 teeth arranged in 25 rows, its jaws are perfectly adapted for grabbing slippery prey like squid. Once caught, there's no escape, as the backward-facing teeth drag the animal deeper into the throat. The frilled shark's long, eel-like body adds to its serpentine image, and its rarity makes it a living fossil of sorts, a reminder of what ancient seas must have looked like. What makes these mouths so unsettling to us is not just their size or number of teeth, but their functionality. On land, predators often kill quickly, tearing prey into manageable pieces. In the deep sea, where energy must be conserved, mouths are designed to swallow whole, to trap and consume without waste. That's why so many creatures have enormous jaws relative to their bodies and teeth, designed not to slice, but to hold. For us, the thought of being swallowed whole is uniquely terrifying, perhaps because it removes the possibility of resistance. It feels like vanishing into the void. But not all deep-sea mouths are about terror. Some are about scale and strangeness. The pelican eel, for instance, has a mouth that can open like a giant scoop, dwarfing its thin body. It looks almost comical, with a jaw that balloons outward to catch small fish and shrimp. Its stomach expands to accommodate whatever it captures, even if it swallows more than it can reasonably handle. This strategy is absurd by surface standards, but logical in the deep, where abundance cannot be wasted. The gulper eel, the anglerfish, the fangtooth, the viper fish, the dragonfish, the goblin shark, the frilled shark, the pelican eel. Together they form a gallery of mouths that seem designed to inspire nightmares. And yet, each one is simply an adaptation to scarcity. Their size, their teeth, their strange mechanics are all ways of coping with a world where meals are unpredictable. To us they look like monsters. To them they are survivors. It's also worth remembering that many of these creatures are small compared to the giants we imagine. Fangtooths and viperfish are only a few inches long, though their jaws make them look terrifying. The real giants, like the colossal squid, combine massive bodies with enormous beaks, hidden in the centre of their tentacles. These beaks are strong enough to slice through flesh, and when paired with the squid's size, they become some of the most formidable weapons in the ocean. Sperm whales bear the marks of those beaks and suckers, proof that battles between titans are fought in the dark. For sailors who saw the scars or found beaks in the stomachs of whales, the evidence was clear. Something with a mouth big enough to wound a whale must surely be monstrous. When we picture all of this, it becomes easy to see why the ocean inspired stories of mouths that could swallow ships. For a sailor looking into the dark water, even the smallest glimpse of teeth or a flash of pale jaws could trigger the imagination. A real gulper eel might only be a metre long, but when described by a frightened sailor, the mouth could grow with every retelling until it was large enough to take down a boat. In that way, biology fed mythology, and the truth blurred into legend. Today, with cameras and submersibles, we can see these mouths for ourselves, but the effect is not diminished. In fact, sometimes the reality feels stranger than the myth. Watching a goblin shark launch its jaws or a gulper eel balloon its mouth is every bit as unsettling as the stories of old. The difference is that now we can understand the function behind the form. The terror gives way to curiosity, and monsters become marvels of adaptation. And yet, for all our knowledge, we haven't seen everything. Many species remain unknown, and some mouths may still be hidden in the dark, waiting to surprise us. Could there be larger gulper eels, longer viper fish, or even undiscovered species with jaws unlike anything we've seen? The deep is vast, and its capacity to astonish us has never been exhausted. Every dive reveals something new, and every discovery reminds us that we are still beginners in understanding this world. So when we think of the mouths that could swallow ships, we can smile at the exaggeration, but we can also recognize the kernel of truth. The abyss is filled with jaws designed for extremes, mouths that would seem unbelievable if not for the fact that we've filmed them, studied them, and sometimes held them in our hands. They don't need to be ship-swallowing monsters to inspire awe. They are awe in themselves. And as we turn from these jaws, from the gaping mouths and endless teeth, we move to another image of giants in the deep. Not all of them are terrifying predators. Some are shadows the size of whales, creatures whose vast presence in the abyss hints at battles and encounters that humans rarely witness. These are the giants whose size alone makes them remarkable, whether they are whales descending to hunt or squid drifting in silence. When you picture the deep ocean, one of the most haunting thoughts is the idea of something vast moving just beyond sight. In the black water, where visibility is only a few meters even with strong lights, a shadow can mean anything. It might be a drifting jellyfish, it might be a school of small fish, or it might be something larger than your vessel. The scale of the deep is so immense that our sense of proportion often fails. What feels like a shadow near the edge of vision could in fact be an animal the size of a bus, gliding silently in the dark. These shadows, the giants of the abyss, are among the most fascinating aspects of the ocean, because they exist at the edge of our perception, halfway between myth and reality. Whales are the most familiar of these shadows. They are mammals like us, but they live their lives in a world we can barely touch. This sperm whale in particular is a true giant of the deep. Adults can grow up to 20 metres long and weigh over 50 tonnes. They are the largest predators on Earth, capable of diving more than a kilometre below the surface to hunt. Their prey, as we've already explored, often includes giant squid. For centuries, sailors wondered why sperm whales returned to the surface scarred, with circular marks that looked like giant suction cups. The answer was that battles were happening in the dark, battles so immense that even whales carried the evidence. To imagine a sperm whale descending is to think of something almost mythical. It takes a deep breath at the surface, then plunges downward, its tail flukes beating in slow, powerful strokes. The light fades within minutes, but the whale keeps going, following clicks of sonar that guide it through the dark. Its heart slows to conserve oxygen, its lungs collapse to withstand the pressure, and it moves steadily into the abyss. Down there, it may encounter a squid nearly as long as itself, and the two creatures engage in a silent struggle, invisible to human eyes. By the time the whale resurfaces, the marks of the fight are written on its skin. For the whale, these encounters are part of survival. For us, they are evidence that the monsters of myth are not just stories, but real animals engaged in a war beneath the waves. Other whales too cast enormous shadows in the deep. Blue whales, the largest animals ever to live on Earth, may not dive as deep as sperm whales, but their presence is overwhelming. At up to 30 metres long and weighing more than 200 tonnes, they dwarf anything else in the ocean. When a blue whale passes near a submersible, it is like a moving wall of life, a shadow so vast that it redefines scale. Even if you know the numbers, even if you've studied the measurements, seeing such a shape in person defies comprehension. In the abyss, where your lights illuminate only a narrow cone, the sense of a whale moving through the dark feels like watching a mountain drift past. But whales are not the only shadows. Giant squid and colossal squid inhabit these depths as well, though sightings are rare. When they do appear, they are often described as ghostly shapes, their long arms trailing behind them like ribbons. Submersible pilots have reported moments when something enormous drifted across their path, just at the edge of the lights, too far to capture clearly on film. In those moments, it's easy to understand why stories of sea monsters persist. Seeing a shape longer than your vessel, moving silently and disappearing just as quickly, is enough to leave anyone wondering what else is down there. There are also the shadows of unknowns. In 1960, during the Trieste's descent to the Challenger Deep, Jacques Picard and Don Walsh reported seeing what looked like a flatfish at nearly 11,000 metres. If true, it would have been a remarkable discovery, but the sighting was never confirmed, and some scientists believe it may have been an illusion caused by sediment or light. Still, the idea that even at the deepest point on Earth, shadows might be moving is enough to fuel speculation. What else might be there, drifting through trenches that no human has ever visited again? Sometimes the shadows come not from living animals, but from the carcasses that fall from above. When a whale dies at the surface, its body eventually sinks, becoming what scientists call a whale fall. As it descends, it becomes a shadow in the deep, a massive shape drifting slowly downward. For creatures living in the abyss, a whale fall is an event as significant as a city being built. Scavengers arrive, feeding on the flesh. Later, bone-eating worms and other specialists take over, breaking down what remains. A single carcass can sustain life for decades, turning the shadow of death into an engine of life in the deep. For humans, shadows in the ocean often blur with imagination. In 1997, the NOAA recorded a mysterious sound in the Pacific nicknamed the bloop. It was so loud it could be detected across thousands of kilometers, and speculation ran wild. Some thought it was an unknown giant creature, larger than any whale. Later analysis suggested it was the sound of icebergs breaking and shifting, but the idea of an unknown giant stayed in the public mind. Even now, when we hear strange recordings from the abyss, we can't help but imagine shadows the size of whales, creatures we haven't yet discovered moving silently beneath us. It's worth noting that the ocean is vast enough to hide such shadows. Even with satellites, sonar and submarines, we've mapped only a fraction of the seafloor in detail. The open water, the mid-water zones where most giants live, remain largely unexplored. If a whale can disappear into the depths with ease, why not other creatures? If a squid can grow longer than a bus and still avoid our cameras for centuries, why not something larger still? The absence of evidence is not proof of absence, especially in a place as immense as the ocean. When submersible pilots describe their experiences, they often return to the feeling of scale. In shallow water, you can see the bottom, gauge distance, and orient yourself. In the deep, there are no references. A shadow passes by, and you can't tell if it's 10 meters away or 50, if it's the size of a fish or the size of a whale. The disorientation is part of the experience, and it makes every shadow feel larger, more mysterious. Even trained scientists admit to moments of awe when a shape looms in the dark and then vanishes without explanation. These shadows remind us that the ocean is not empty. It is filled with life, often larger and stranger than we expect. Whales, squid, sharks, and creatures we haven't yet named move through the darkness as naturally as birds move through the sky. To them, the abyss is not hostile but home. To us, it is an alien realm, where even the most familiar animals take on a different aspect. A whale seen at the surface is majestic. A whale seen as a shadow in the deep is something else entirely. A reminder of scale, mystery, and the limits of human knowledge. And beyond whales and squid, there are other giants, less familiar. The jellyfish known as Stygiomedusa gigantea has a bell more than a meter across and tentacles extending over 10 meters. When it drifts through the dark, it looks like a living shadow, pulsing silently, its movements slow and ghostly. Submersibles have encountered it only rarely, but when they do, the effect is unforgettable. The jellyfish fills the view, its long arms trailing into blackness, a shadow both fragile and immense. There are siphonophores too, colonial organisms made up of many small units that function together as one. Some siphonophores stretch longer than blue whales, their delicate bodies glowing faintly in the dark. Imagine a thread of light tens of meters long, drifting like a ribbon through the abyss. To see such a creature is to see both delicacy and immensity at once, a shadow made of many smaller parts, existing in silence. The giants of the deep, whether whales, squid or jellyfish, remind us that scale is relative. To a small fish, even an anglerfish is a shadow too large to comprehend. To us, a whale is beyond our scale. But what about shadows beyond whales? Could there be creatures larger still, hiding in trenches or drifting in open waters we rarely visit? It's not a question we can answer with certainty, and that uncertainty is what keeps the imagination alive. Every time we send machines into the deep, we hope to capture more of these shadows, to turn them from fleeting glimpses into knowledge. And yet, there's a part of us that may not want all the mysteries solved. The shadows give the ocean its sense of wonder, its reminder that there are still places where we do not know what moves beside us. They keep the stories alive, the sense that monsters might still exist, not in legend but in reality, hidden just beyond our lights. As we leave the thought of these enormous shapes, it's worth remembering that not all giants of the deep are terrifying. Some are scavengers, some are delicate, some are so strange that they inspire curiosity more than fear. From shadows the size of whales, our attention shifts to the gentle giants that inhabit the abyss, the creatures whose size is impressive but whose presence is quiet, almost peaceful, in the endless dark. When we think about giants in the ocean, it's easy to let the mind leap straight to the terrifying ones. Tentacles reaching from the black, jaws lined with teeth like knives, shadows looming larger than ships. But not all giants are built for violence. Some of the most remarkable creatures in the abyss are enormous not because they are predators, but because they have found other ways to survive. These are the gentle giants, animals whose strangeness and size inspire awe rather than fear, drifting through the darkness with lives that feel almost serene compared to the battles we've imagined so far. One of the most striking examples is the siphonophore. Unlike a squid or a whale, it isn't a single organism in the way we usually think of animals. It's a colony, made up of many smaller units called zooids, each specialised for a particular task. Some handle movement, others digestion, others reproduction or defence. Together they function as a single creature, coordinated and vast. Some siphonophores stretch over 30 metres long, making them among the longest living things on the planet, longer even than blue whales. They're delicate, fragile threads of life, often glowing faintly with bioluminescence as they drift through the dark. To see one is to witness a living chain of lights, swaying with the current, a ribbon that seems both impossibly delicate and endlessly long. For all their size, they don't hunt with violence. Instead, their stinging cells capture small prey that brushes against them, feeding the whole colony. Gentle giants in every sense, they move through the abyss like drifting galaxies. Another quiet giant of the deep is the giant isopod. To most people, they look immediately familiar and immediately unsettling, because they resemble pill bugs, the little creatures we see rolling into balls under rocks in gardens, only on a massive scale. Giant isopods can grow 1/2 metre long, their armoured shells and jointed legs giving them a prehistoric look. They crawl across the seafloor slowly, scavenging on whatever they find. Sometimes it's the remains of fish or squid, sometimes it's a whale carcass. They're not hunters, they're cleaners of the abyss, taking what's left and turning it into sustenance. Despite their eerie appearance, they are harmless to humans. Their size is a reminder that even simple survival strategies can lead to extraordinary adaptations when given enough time. Jellyfish, too, belong to this group of gentle giants. Many species in the deep grow far larger than the ones we see near shore. Stygiomedusa gigantea, for example, is a rarely seen jellyfish with a bell more than 1 metre across and arms stretching over 10 metres. Unlike smaller jellyfish, it doesn't use stinging tentacles but long, flowing arms to trap and ensnare prey. It moves with slow, pulsing motions, drifting rather than chasing, glowing faintly in the dark. When submersibles encounter it, the effect is mesmerising. The jellyfish fills the view like a floating umbrella, trailing arms into the black, a reminder that beauty in the deep can be immense without being threatening. Even stranger are the deep-sea comb jellies, or ctenophores. These translucent creatures are often small, but some grow surprisingly large, and their method of moving sets them apart. Instead of pulsing like jellyfish, they use rows of tiny beating cilia that refract light, creating shimmering rainbows that ripple across their bodies. In the blackness of the abyss, this iridescence is stunning, like watching a rainbow trapped inside a ghost. They're not hunters in the violent sense, but feeders on plankton and drifting material, floating through the water with a grace that feels otherworldly. Sometimes gentle giants aren't delicate at all, but massive and solid. Consider the Greenland shark, a species that inhabits deep, cold waters in the North Atlantic. These sharks can grow over 6 metres long and live for centuries. Some estimates suggest up to 400 years, making them the longest-lived vertebrates known. Despite their size, they are slow-moving, almost sluggish. Their metabolism is so slow that they rarely chase prey, preferring to scavenge or ambush when opportunities arise. Their long lives, slow pace, and quiet existence make them very different from the image of sharks as aggressive hunters. If anything, they're symbols of patience, creatures that endure rather than conquer. Even among fish, there are giants that embody gentleness. The oarfish, for instance, can grow over 10 metres long, with a thin, ribbon-like body and a red crest along its head. It's the longest bony fish in the world, and for centuries it was likely the source of many sea serpent legends. Yet despite its enormous size and dramatic appearance, it feeds on plankton and small fish, drifting vertically in the water with undulating movements. To see an oarfish alive is rare. They usually surface only when sick or dying, but when they do, they inspire wonder more than fear. They are reminders that size doesn't always mean danger. These gentle giants are important because they balance the narrative of the deep. For every terrifying jaw and monstrous tentacle, there are creatures whose enormity is paired with fragility, patience, or quiet endurance. They show us that survival in the abyss doesn't always mean aggression. Sometimes it means growing large enough to deter predators, or delicate enough to drift unnoticed, or slow enough to conserve energy for centuries. Their presence also complicates the human idea of monsters. When sailors described enormous shapes in the water, they often assumed danger. But what if many of those shapes were harmless? A ribbon-like oarfish mistaken for a serpent, a drifting jellyfish seen as a ghostly menace, a colony siphonophore imagined as a single vast creature. Fear and imagination turn them into threats, but the reality may have been gentler. That doesn't make them less extraordinary. In fact, the truth is often more interesting than the myth. One reason these gentle giants fascinate us is their rarity. Many are seen only a handful of times, their existence confirmed by chance encounters or by remains washed ashore. Scientists can spend decades searching without ever glimpsing some of them alive. When footage does emerge, it feels like peering into another world, a brief invitation into a realm that is usually hidden. Those moments remind us how much of the ocean remains unknown, and how many of its giants, gentle or otherwise, still wait to be discovered. Another reason is their strangeness. The deep sea is a place where the rules of biology bend. Colonies act as individuals. Creatures glow with light they generate themselves. Sharks live longer than empires. Pillbugs grow into armoured crawlers 1/2 metre long. Jellyfish become larger than humans, drifting like living parachutes. These are not monsters of violence, but monsters of scale, of endurance, of difference. They show us possibilities of life that we would never imagine if we only looked at the surface world. Even whales, often imagined as predators in their battles with squid, can be counted among the gentle giants. The largest of them, the blue whale, feeds not on other giants but on some of the smallest creatures in the sea, krill. They open their massive mouths, engulfing tons of water, then filter it through baleen plates to capture the tiny shrimp-like animals inside. A blue whale can eat millions of krill in a single day, yet the process is almost peaceful. Despite their size, they are not hunters of terrifying prey, but grazers of the ocean, feeding on abundance with grace. Thinking of the gentle giants brings a different feeling than imagining the predators. Instead of fear, they inspire calm. Instead of dread, they provoke wonder. They remind us that the ocean is not just a place of danger, but a place of strange beauty, where life takes forms that challenge our expectations. For a sailor seeing one for the first time, the impression might have been bewildering or frightening. For us, with more knowledge, it can be deeply moving. And yet, even these gentle giants are not without mystery. Their size alone raises questions. Why do some creatures in the deep grow so large? Scientists call it deep-sea gigantism, a phenomenon where many species, from isopods to amphipods to jellyfish, reach sizes far beyond their shallow water relatives. The reasons aren't fully understood. Some suggest it's because cold temperatures slow metabolism, allowing creatures to grow larger over longer lifespans. Others argue it's an adaptation to scarcity. where being bigger allows for more efficient energy storage and longer survival between meals. Whatever the explanation, the result is a world where even scavengers and drifters can become giants. The gentle giants also play crucial roles in the ecosystem. Whale-falls sustain entire communities. Siphonophores shape the flow of plankton. Sharks regulate scavenger populations. Jellyfish blooms can alter nutrient cycles. Their lives, quiet as they may seem, ripple outward through the abyss, shaping everything around them. To call them gentle doesn't mean they are unimportant. It means their power is subtler, woven into the fabric of the deep rather than displayed in battles or attacks. For humans, meeting these creatures in the dark ocean is a humbling experience. A submersible drifting past a siphonophore tens of meters long, glowing like a string of stars, forces us to rethink our scale in the world. A giant isopod crawling slowly across the seafloor reminds us that even the simplest designs can last for millions of years. A Greenland shark living longer than our oldest civilizations challenges our sense of time. These encounters shift our perspective. The monsters of the abyss aren't always there to frighten us. Sometimes they are there to teach us humility. And as we reflect on these quiet, strange, enormous lives, we are reminded that the deep is a place of contrasts, violence and peace, predators and scavengers, fragility and immensity, all exist side by side, hidden in the same darkness. From the gentle giants, our thoughts drift naturally to what happens when life ends in the abyss, when shadows of giants fall from above and become food for entire communities below. This is the next part of the story, the skeletons in the deep, where death becomes life in the most unexpected ways. When a giant dies at sea, the story of its life doesn't end with silence. In the deep ocean, death is not an ending at all, but the beginning of another vast and complicated process. What we might think of as a carcass, a lifeless body sinking into darkness, becomes the foundation of an entire ecosystem, feeding creatures for years, sometimes decades. These skeletons in the deep, whether the remains of whales, sharks, or other giants, turn the abyss into a place of renewal, where decay is transformed into life. To understand them is to understand how the deep ocean sustains itself in a world where resources are always scarce. When a whale dies at the surface, its body doesn't stay there forever. Gas from decomposition can keep it afloat for a while, but eventually the weight takes over. The carcass begins to sink, slowly at first, then gathering momentum as the ocean claims it. For hours, sometimes days, the body drifts downward through zones of light, twilight, and finally into the midnight depths. To anything watching, it must look like a shadow the size of a building, falling endlessly into blackness. For the creatures waiting below, this shadow is a miracle, an unexpected abundance in a world of scarcity. The arrival of a whale fall is like a city appearing overnight. Scavengers arrive first. Sharks, hagfish, giant isopods, amphipods. They tear into the soft flesh, feeding voraciously. For many of them, such a meal is rare, a chance to gorge and store energy for the long stretches when food is absent. This stage may last for months, even years, depending on the size of the carcass. During that time, the deep is alive with activity, a frenzy of consumption that turns the silent seafloor into a feast. But the story doesn't end with the flesh. Once the soft tissues are gone, the bones remain, and they too are full of energy. Specialized creatures like bone-eating worms known as osedacs colonize the skeleton. These worms lack mouths and stomachs, but they extend root-like structures into the bone, releasing bacteria that break down fats and proteins trapped inside. The worms feed on the nutrients released, turning the bones into food. Entire communities of worms, bacteria, and other organisms build themselves on the skeleton, creating a miniature ecosystem that can last for decades. In this way, a single whale fall may support hundreds of species, many of which are found nowhere else. Some are highly specialized, adapted only for this stage of life. For scientists, whale falls are like time capsules, revealing how life can persist in extreme environments with limited resources. They also provide a glimpse into how ecosystems might have functioned long before whales existed, when giant marine reptiles filled the oceans of the past. The principle remains the same. Death above feeds life below. It's not just whales. Other giants contribute to this cycle too. Large sharks, rays, and even fish like tuna or sunfish can become carcasses that drift downward. While smaller than whales, their bodies still provide significant nourishment. Even trees washed out to sea and dragged into the abyss can become bases for deep-sea life, though they don't last as long. In every case, the pattern repeats. Something from above falls and the deep claims it, turning absence into abundance. The process also reveals the efficiency of the ocean. Nothing is wasted. From the moment a carcass begins to sink, it is feeding life. Small fish nibble at the surface. Midwater scavengers take their share. As it reaches the bottom, larger animals tear away flesh. Later, worms and bacteria reduce even the bones to nothing. In the end, what remains is scattered sediment, enriched with nutrients that feed future generations of creatures. The skeleton disappears, but its impact lingers, woven into the web of life around it. For humans, whale falls are fascinating not just as scientific phenomena, but as symbols. They remind us that the deep is not isolated, not separate from the world above. Every whale fall links surface life to abyssal life. Every skeleton a bridge between two realms. The death of a giant in one world sustains entire communities in another. In this sense, the ocean is not divided but continuous, every part connected through cycles of life and death. They also challenge our perception of time. On land, carcasses are consumed quickly, disappearing within weeks or months. In the deep, the cold, dark, pressurized environment slows everything down. A whale fall can last for decades, a slow unfolding of life feeding on death. For creatures of the abyss, time moves differently. Meals are rare, growth is slow, and survival depends on patience. A whale fall is not just food, it's a foundation for generations. What's striking is how recently we've come to understand this. Whale falls were first observed in the 1980s, when deep-sea submersibles stumbled upon them. Before that, scientists had speculated about what happened to whale carcasses, but had no direct evidence. The discovery opened a new field of research, revealing ecosystems we hadn't imagined. Since then, more whale falls have been studied, each one showing new species, new adaptations, and new interactions. Yet, given the size of the ocean, we've only seen a handful compared to the countless carcasses that must sink every year. Most of them vanish into the dark without human eyes ever witnessing them. This raises another thought. How many myths of monsters might have begun with sightings of carcasses at sea? A bloated whale body floating on the surface could easily be mistaken for a sea serpent or a giant fish. Sailors encountering such remains, without knowledge of decomposition or the life cycles of whales, would have seen only something vast, unfamiliar and frightening. The ocean recycles everything, but in the process it sometimes creates images that fuel our imagination. Skeletons in the deep also remind us of our own impact. As humans hunted whales to near extinction in the 19th and 20th centuries, the number of whale falls must have plummeted. This would have reduced a crucial source of energy for deep-sea ecosystems, altering the balance below in ways we still don't fully understand. Today, as some whale populations recover, so too may the ecosystems that depend on their deaths. The link between conservation above and survival below is stronger than we once realised. But whale falls are not the only skeletons in the deep. Shipwrecks too become artificial whale falls, feeding life in similar ways. Sunken vessels lost to storms or war often attract scavengers, corals and fish, becoming islands of life in otherwise barren stretches of seafloor. The difference is that these are not natural gifts of death but the byproducts of human activity. Still, they demonstrate the principle that the deep is hungry and will claim whatever it is given. All of this forces us to rethink the idea of death in the ocean. On land, death feels final, a separation. In the deep, it feels cyclical. Skeletons are not symbols of endings but of beginnings, stages in a process that has continued for millions of years. The abyss does not waste, does not pause, does not mourn, it transforms. And in that transformation it creates life forms we never expected, from worms without mouths to bacteria that eat fat and oil in complete darkness. For the giants of the deep, death is not a solitary event. It is a gathering, a moment that reshapes the community around it. In that sense, the skeletons of the deep are not just remnants, but anchors around which life organises itself. They are reminders that in the most extreme places on Earth, survival depends not only on the living but on the dead. And as we leave the thought of skeletons, we naturally move to another kind of survival. Not everything in the deep is new or adapted from recent evolution. Some creatures have survived for millions of years unchanged, persisting through extinctions and upheavals. They are living fossils, reminders of worlds long gone still swimming in the abyss. To move from skeletons to these survivors is to move from death to endurance, from endings to astonishing continuity. When people think of the deep sea, they often imagine strange new creatures evolving in isolation, but the abyss also holds something just as remarkable. Survivors. These are the living fossils, animals that have endured for millions of years, persisting through mass extinctions, continental shifts, and the rise and fall of entire ecosystems on land. They look almost unchanged from the forms they took in ancient oceans, as though time has moved differently for them, or perhaps as if they stepped out of another era entirely and simply stayed. Seeing them is like seeing a piece of prehistory, alive and moving in the present. One of the most famous examples is the coelacanth. For decades, it was believed to be extinct, known only from fossils dating back more than 60 million years. Then, in 1938, a fisherman off the coast of South Africa caught a strange fish with lobed fins and a body unlike anything local scientists had ever seen. It turned out to be a living coelacanth, a survivor from a lineage thought lost with the dinosaurs. The discovery stunned the scientific world. Here was a creature that had persisted unchanged in the deep while everything on the surface had transformed beyond recognition. Since then, more coelacanths have been found in deep waters off Africa and Indonesia. They are slow-moving nocturnal hunters, using their lobed fins to walk along the seafloor. At nearly 2 meters long, they are imposing, but not dangerous to humans. They are reminders that evolution doesn't always mean change. Sometimes it means survival by staying the same. Sharks are another group of ancient survivors. They've been around for over 400 million years, predating trees and dinosaurs. While many species have evolved into modern forms, some deep-sea sharks still resemble their ancient relatives. The frilled shark, for example, looks more like an eel than a typical shark, with a long body and gills that form a frill around its head. Its rows of trident-shaped teeth and flexible jaws suggest a design honed in ancient seas, one that still works today. Seeing one is like glimpsing a predator from prehistory, alive and hunting in the dark. The goblin shark, sometimes called a living fossil itself, is another relic of deep evolutionary history. Its strange, elongated snout and protruding jaws set it apart from modern sharks, giving it a ghostly, alien appearance. Fossil evidence shows that its lineage stretches back over 100 million years. Its survival in the deep may be due to its slow metabolism and specialized feeding habits, making it less vulnerable to the changes that wiped out so many other species. When caught or filmed, its sudden jaw extension shocks observers, a reminder that even ancient designs can be startlingly effective. Beyond sharks, there are other deep-sea fish that seem to belong to another age. The hagfish, for instance, has been around for more than 300 million years. It looks primitive, with no jaws and a body that produces slime in astonishing quantities. When threatened, hagfish release this slime into the water, clogging the gills of predators and allowing the hagfish to escape. To modern eyes, the hagfish seems bizarre, almost alien, but its survival strategy has kept it alive for longer than most species on Earth, a testament to the effectiveness of simplicity. Crustaceans too have their ancient representatives. The giant isopods we met earlier are distant relatives of ancient trilobites, the armoured crawlers that once dominated the seas. While trilobites disappeared hundreds of millions of years ago, isopods endured, their simple, armoured design continuing to work in the deep. Walking slowly across the seafloor, they carry the echoes of ancient seas into the present. Even among cephalopods, there are living fossils. The nautilus, with its coiled shell and many tentacles, has remained largely unchanged for over 500 million years. While most cephalopods abandon shells in favour of speed and flexibility, the nautilus kept its protective spiral, drifting slowly through the deep. Its eyes are less advanced than those of squid or octopuses, lacking lenses, but they are perfectly suited for its slow, scavenging lifestyle. Nautiluses are not predators of myth but quiet survivors, carrying ancient design into modern seas. These living fossils remind us that survival is not always about progress in the way we define it. On land, evolution often seems like a race, faster, smarter, more complex. In the deep, stability is sometimes the key. The environment changes slowly, and adaptations that worked millions of years ago can still work today. The coelacanth's lobed fins, the hagfish's slime, the nautilus's shell, all of these are solutions to challenges that haven't disappeared. In the abyss, the past is not gone, it's alive. What's fascinating is how these creatures challenge our idea of extinction. When we say a species is extinct, we often mean we haven't seen it in a long time, but the discovery of the coelacanth showed that the deep sea can hide survivors for millions of years. It raises the question, how many other species thought extinct might still be living in the darkness, far from human eyes? Fossils tell us what once lived, but they don't always tell us what still does. The ocean's vastness means it can shelter secrets for far longer than we expect. Living fossils also complicate our sense of monsters. A sailor seeing a frilled shark rise from the deep might describe it as a serpent or dragon. Someone catching a hagfish might see it as a slimy demon. To people unfamiliar with these creatures, they would seem like nightmares. In truth, they are relics of the past, not new monsters but old ones, carrying the designs of ancient oceans into ours. The fear they inspire comes not from aggression, but from their difference, their refusal to conform to the creatures we know. For scientists, studying living fossils is like peering into history. These animals reveal how ancient ecosystems functioned, how adaptations endured, and how survival strategies evolve, or don't, over time. They are living laboratories, reminders that evolution is not a straight line, but a branching tree, with some branches continuing for hundreds of millions of years unchanged. For us, encountering them is humbling. To see a nautilus drifting in its spiral shell, or a coelacanth moving slowly along the sea floor, is to realise that we are not the first or the longest story on this planet. Entire lineages have endured through ice ages, asteroid impacts, and shifts in climate, surviving where countless others perished. They remind us of our own fragility and of the depth of time that lies beneath every wave. The deep sea, then, is not only a place of monsters or new discoveries, it is also a museum, a living archive where ancient designs continue, preserved not in stone but in flesh. The creatures here are not fossils trapped in rock, but fossils that swim, crawl and drift, carrying history with them. They embody endurance, showing that sometimes the best way to survive is simply to remain. And as we leave these survivors behind, our attention shifts again to the adaptations that make life in the abyss so strange. If living fossils represent the persistence of ancient forms, then bioluminescence represents the innovation of the deep, the creation of new ways to thrive in darkness. From the endurance of the past, we move naturally into the glow of the present, to the lights that make the abyss shimmer despite its eternal night. When you sink deep enough into the ocean, the world should be pitch black. Sunlight disappears within the first few hundred meters, and by 1,000 meters, not a single ray from above remains. Logic tells us the abyss should be endless night, and yet it isn't. Down here, in the place where no sun has ever reached, there is light, flashes, pulses, glimmers, glowing trails. The abyss is alive with its own illumination, and this glow is not borrowed from the stars or the sky. It comes from the creatures themselves. Bioluminescence is one of the most widespread and astonishing adaptations in the deep sea. At least 3/4 of the animals living in the mid-water zone can produce light of some kind, from tiny plankton to massive squid. It's not fire, not electricity, not anything mystical. It's a chemical reaction, usually involving a substance called luciferin reacting with oxygen, triggered by enzymes known as luciferase. The result is a glow, cold light with almost no heat. To us it looks like magic. To the animals, it is survival. The uses of bioluminescence are as varied as the creatures that wield it. Some use it as camouflage. That might sound strange at first, but in the deep, being invisible is a constant challenge. Even without sunlight, there's still faint light from above, and anything swimming beneath might be silhouetted if another animal looks up. To avoid this, many creatures use counter-illumination. They produce light on their undersides that matches the faint glow from above, erasing their shadows and blending them perfectly into the background. To predators looking upward, these creatures simply vanish into the dim blue haze. Others use light as a lure. The anglerfish is the most famous example, carrying a glowing bulb on a stalk that dangles in front of its mouth. Small fish, curious or hungry, are drawn to the glow, mistaking it for food. When they approach, the anglerfish's jaws snap shut, and the trap is complete. But the anglerfish isn't alone. Dragonfish have glowing barbel lures beneath their jaws, which they wave slowly to attract prey. Some squid have glowing patches near their mouths that serve a similar function. The abyss is full of hunters holding up lights in the darkness, beacons that spell doom for the unwary. Light can also be a weapon of defense. Some shrimp and squid can eject clouds of glowing fluid when threatened, dazzling or confusing predators long enough to escape. Others flash suddenly, startling attackers in the dark. For small animals, even a brief glow can mean the difference between life and death. Imagine being a predator in total darkness, closing in on a shadow when suddenly your vision is flooded with a burst of light. In that instant of disorientation, the prey slips away, leaving you with nothing. Communication is another powerful use. Many species of deep-sea fish and squid use patterns of flashes to signal to each other. These patterns can be species-specific, like codes written in light. Some may be courtship displays, attracting mates in the endless dark. Others may be warnings, territorial markers, or coordination between individuals. In a world without sound that carries clearly, light becomes a language, one spoken in pulses and glimmers. And then there are the creatures that simply glow, not as lure, defense, or camouflage, but as a constant part of their existence. Siphonophores, those colonial organisms we visited earlier, sometimes stretch for tens of meters, their bodies dotted with glowing units like strings of stars. When they drift through the water, they create the impression of constellations moving in silence. Certain jellyfish pulse rhythmically with bioluminescent light, turning their movements into slow, hypnotic displays. To us, it looks like beauty for its own sake. To them, it may be something else entirely, perhaps a deterrent to predators or a byproduct of other adaptations. What makes all of this remarkable is not just that the deep is glowing, but that it glows in patterns, colours and strategies that seem almost designed to inspire wonder. Most of the light is blue-green because those wavelengths travel farthest through water, but some creatures have evolved the ability to produce or detect red light, invisible to most others. Dragonfish, for example, use red bioluminescence as a private spotlight, illuminating prey that cannot see the glow. To the prey, the world is still dark. To the dragonfish, it's lit up with targets. It's a secret advantage, like carrying night vision goggles in a world of blindness. Scientists studying bioluminescence have often remarked how varied and inventive it seems. In one part of the ocean you might see tiny flashes like sparks. In another, glowing trails that follow behind swimming animals, as if the water itself remembers their movements. In yet another, large pulses that look like lightning flickering across a jellyfish's body. Each adaptation is finely tuned to the challenges of the deep. Find food, avoid being eaten, reproduce. But the effect, taken as a whole, is that the abyss is not truly dark. It is an alien light show, constant but subtle, seen only by those who live there. For humans, glimpsing this glow for the first time is unforgettable. Submersible pilots describe turning off their lights and drifting in silence, only to watch the darkness come alive with glimmers all around them. Every movement of the vessel stirs up plankton that flash in response, like stars rippling in black water. Larger shapes appear as glowing outlines, then vanish again. It's like floating through a galaxy turned upside down, stars not above but all around. For scientists, it's data. For anyone else, it feels like magic. Bioluminescence also plays a role in myths. Sailors spoke of glowing seas, waters that shimmered under their ships at night. These were not fantasies. They were encounters with bioluminescent plankton near the surface, glowing in response to waves and movement. Entire stretches of ocean can light up this way, creating the impression of glowing tracks behind ships or glowing waves breaking on shore. For people without scientific explanations, the effect was both beautiful and eerie, a reminder that the sea had powers beyond understanding. Even now, bioluminescent bays in places like Puerto Rico attract visitors who paddle kayaks through waters that light up with every stroke. It's a small, surface version of what happens constantly in the deep, unseen. The glow of the abyss also raises questions about intelligence and evolution. To produce light requires energy. In the deep, energy is scarce. So why have so many species evolved the ability? The answer lies in efficiency. Bioluminescence is surprisingly cheap in terms of energy, far cheaper than movement or sound, and its benefits, finding food, avoiding predators, attracting mates, are enormous. In evolutionary terms, light is one of the most successful strategies in the abyss, and that's why it's everywhere. It's easy to think of this glow as decoration, but for the animals, it is survival. The anglerfish's lure isn't there to impress us, it's there to eat. The shrimp's glowing cloud isn't a spectacle, it's a last chance to live. The dragonfish's red light isn't beauty, it's stealth. And yet, when we see these things, we can't help but be moved by them. Survival and beauty are not opposites, sometimes they are the same thing. For us, bioluminescence is also a reminder of how much we don't know. Many deep-sea species have yet to be studied in detail. We see the light, but we don't always know why it's used, what signals it carries, or what strategies it supports. Whole languages may be flashing silently in the abyss, invisible to us. Entire hunting methods may be based on light we can't detect. To us, it's mystery. To them, it's everyday life. Thinking about the glow in the abyss also changes how we imagine monsters. When sailors thought of the deep, they imagined blackness and jaws. But what if the real monsters were glowing? What if the shapes rising from the deep carried lanterns on their heads, glowing eyes, or bodies that pulsed with light? The truth is that many of them do. The abyss is not empty black. It's a flickering, glowing theatre, where every movement can reveal or conceal. Monsters of light are perhaps even stranger than monsters of shadow. As submersibles capture more footage of glowing creatures, the sense of mystery deepens rather than diminishes. The glow is not rare, not occasional. It is everywhere. If we could see it in full, it would look like a vast moving constellation beneath the waves, shifting endlessly, made not of stars but of life itself. And as we leave this glow behind, we realise that it's not the only invisible signal in the deep. Light is only one way the abyss speaks, sound is another. In the vast darkness, where sight is limited even with glowing adaptations, sound carries across unimaginable distances. Strange calls, eerie recordings, and unknown noises have been captured in the deep, each one hinting at creatures we may not yet have seen. From light, the story moves naturally to sound, the voices of the abyss echoing in ways we're only beginning to understand. If light in the abyss is rare and precious, sound is its opposite. In the deep ocean, sound travels farther and faster than it does through air. Where our voices fade after a few dozen meters on land, in water a single sound can echo for hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers. For animals living in darkness, sound is the most reliable way to sense the world around them. It reveals distance, direction, even the size of objects. For humans, listening to the deep has been both a scientific tool and a source of endless mystery. Because what we hear is often stranger than what we see. The ocean is full of natural sounds, waves breaking above, rain hitting the surface, icebergs cracking and shifting in polar seas. All of these noises travel downward into the deep. But beneath those familiar sources are others far less understood. The songs of whales, the clicks of dolphins, the low rumbles of fish, and sounds that don't match any known animal at all. These strange noises have been recorded for decades, leaving us with puzzles that still haven't been solved. One of the most famous is known simply as the bloop. Recorded in 1997 by hydrophones thousands of kilometers apart, it was an ultra-low frequency sound that lasted for about a minute and was strong enough to be detected across the Pacific. At first, speculation ran wild. The sound had characteristics similar to those made by living creatures, but it was far louder than any whale. Some wondered if it could be evidence of an unknown giant, something larger than anything we'd ever discovered. The idea of a sea monster caught the public imagination. Later analysis suggested the bloop was probably caused by icebergs cracking and breaking apart. But the initial mystery lingered. For many people, the thought that the ocean might be hiding something so enormous it could make us sound like that was irresistible. The bloop wasn't alone. Other mysterious sounds have been captured, each given names by the scientists who study them. Julia, recorded in 1999, was another loud, low-frequency noise lasting about 15 seconds. Slow Down, recorded in 1997, was a sound that gradually decreased in frequency, as though something large were decelerating in the deep. The Train, recorded in 1997 as well, resembled the steady, rhythmic noise of wheels on a track. In each case, ice and geological activity have been suggested as explanations, but none are universally accepted, and the possibility of unknown animals always lingers in the background. Part of what makes these sounds so fascinating is the scale involved. On land, the largest animals, elephants for example, can produce low rumbles that carry for a few kilometers. In the ocean, whales produce calls that can travel for thousands of kilometers. Blue whales, the largest animals ever to live, communicate with low-frequency songs that may be heard across entire ocean basins. Imagine calling out and being heard not just in your town, not just in your country, but on another continent. For whales, that's reality. Their voices are so powerful and so tuned to the properties of water that they can stay in touch across distances that dwarf our own abilities. Sperm whales, too, are masters of sound. They use rapid clicks for echolocation, sending pulses into the water and listening for the echoes that return. This allows them to see in complete darkness, building mental maps of the world around them through sound alone. Their clicks are so loud, over 200 decibels, that they are among the most powerful sounds produced by any animal. Divers who have been close to sperm whales describe feeling the clicks as physical vibrations in their bodies, like being struck by invisible waves. These sounds are not just communication, but tools for hunting, navigation, and survival. Dolphins use similar methods, though at higher frequencies. Their echolocation is so precise that they can distinguish between different kinds of objects, even identifying whether a fish has air in its swim bladder. In the deep, where sight is limited, such abilities are invaluable. Sound becomes a sense as sharp as sight, perhaps even sharper. For us, it's difficult to imagine perceiving the world this way, but for these animals, it's second nature. And then there are the fish. Many species of fish produce sounds by vibrating their swim bladders or grinding their teeth. Some do it to attract mates, others to defend territory, and still others for reasons we don't yet understand. In shallow waters, these sounds can create choruses, entire reefs alive with noise. In the deep, the calls are less studied, but they are certainly there. To a hydrophone lowered into the abyss, the ocean is not silent. It's a constant background of clicks, rumbles, groans, and pulses, many of which we cannot identify. For humans, listening to these sounds has been both thrilling and unsettling. The bloop and its cousins remind us how little we know. Whale songs remind us of the giants that share the planet with us. The sheer power of sperm whale clicks reminds us that we are fragile intruders in a world designed for other senses. Even when we think we understand the ocean, the sounds bring us back to humility. There's also something haunting about the unknown recordings. To hear a noise that lasts for minutes, powerful enough to cross an entire ocean and not know what made it, is to brush up against mystery in its purest form. It's easy to imagine monsters when you can't see the source. The ocean's vastness allows for endless possibilities. A cracking iceberg might be the explanation, but what if it isn't? What if there are still creatures out there large enough to produce sounds beyond anything we know? The thought lingers, feeding both science and imagination. Sound also connects back to myth. Sailors once spoke of the sea groaning, of voices beneath the waves, of songs that lured men to their deaths. Some of those tales may have been inspired by real phenomena. Whales surfacing and calling at night might have been mistaken for voices. The groans of shifting ice might have been heard as the cries of monsters. In a time before hydrophones and analysis, sound was a mystery in itself, and mystery always breeds stories. What makes all of this compelling is that even now, with modern technology, we are still telling stories. We have better data, but we also have unanswered questions. Some sounds remain unidentified decades after they were recorded. Others may never be explained. In the end, the deep sea is too vast and our listening stations cover only a fraction of it. For every sound we capture, countless others pass unheard. Somewhere in the abyss, giants may be speaking to each other in voices too low, too rare, or too distant for us to detect. Listening to the deep is a reminder of scale. Our ears, tuned for air, are not built for water. We rely on machines to translate, to amplify, to record. What we hear is always filtered, partial. The animals that live there don't need translation. To them, the ocean is alive with sound, full of information, connections and warnings. To us, it's fragments, puzzles, and hints. And yet, those fragments are enough to show us that the ocean is not silent. It's a place of constant conversation, some of it familiar, some of it beyond our understanding. Every click, every groan, every mysterious low-frequency pulse adds to the picture of a world alive in ways we can't fully grasp. As we reflect on these voices of the abyss, we naturally turn back to the giants themselves. We've heard their echoes, their calls, their battles recorded in sound. But what about the evidence we can measure directly? What about the squid brought to the surface, the sharks tagged, the jellyfish filmed? From sound, the story moves back to touch and sight, to the tangible giants we've studied and measured, the ones that prove the monsters of imagination are real after all. For all the stories, sounds and shadows that leave us wondering, there are some giants of the deep we have managed to measure. They are no longer just myth or speculation, but confirmed by specimens, photographs and research. To hold a piece of them in our hands or to capture them on camera is to bridge the gap between imagination and reality. They prove that some of the monsters whispered about for centuries were never exaggerations at all. They were simply hidden, living where we rarely go. The giant squid, Architeuthis dux, is perhaps the most famous. Once dismissed as myth, it is now recognised as a real animal. Specimens washed ashore or pulled from nets have given us physical evidence, and live sightings, though rare, have provided undeniable proof. The largest confirmed giant squid measured nearly 13 metres long, from the tip of its mantle to the end of its feeding tentacles. That's longer than a school bus. Its eyes, the largest in the animal kingdom, are about 30 centimetres across, giving it an almost alien gaze. For centuries, sailors told tales of ships attacked by enormous tentacled creatures, and while those stories were exaggerated, the core truth was there. Something enormous really was swimming in the dark. Even larger in some ways is the colossal squid, Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni. While shorter in total length, with estimates of around 10 metres, it is far bulkier than the giant squid. Its body is thicker, its mass heavier, and its tentacles are armed with rotating hooks in addition to suckers. A specimen captured near Antarctica in 2007 weighed almost half a ton. To see such a creature laid out on a table was staggering. Its flesh was pinkish, its eyes immense, its hooks like something out of science fiction. Unlike the slender, trailing form of the giant squid, the colossal squid looks like a true powerhouse, built for strength as well as stealth. Both giant and colossal squid are elusive. They live in deep waters, rarely surfacing unless dying or injured. Their rarity adds to their mystique, but the evidence we have is undeniable. They are not legends anymore. They are facts, measured, photographed, dissected, and studied. Every sucker, every hook, every beak has been catalogued. And yet, even with this evidence, they retain an air of mystery, because for all we know, we've still seen only fragments of their lives. Sharks provide another set of measured giants. The Greenland shark, for example, is one of the largest species, reaching lengths of over 6 metres. What makes it extraordinary is not just its size, but its lifespan. Studies of eye tissue suggest they can live for centuries, perhaps as long as 400 years. That means some living Greenland sharks today may have been alive before the United States was founded, before Newton wrote his laws of motion, before much of modern history even began. Slow-moving, cold-blooded and patient, they embody the endurance of the abyss. Their size is impressive, but their longevity is what truly sets them apart, making them living witnesses to centuries of change. The frilled shark is another measured giant, though not in absolute size. At about 2 metres long, it's modest compared to others, but its appearance connects it to ancient seas. With its eel-like body, its frilled gills, and its rows of backward-facing teeth, it looks like something out of a fossil record. To see one alive is to see a creature that has changed little in millions of years. Its measurements tell us it is real, not a story. Its presence tells us the deep still shelters the old alongside the new. Among fish, the oarfish stands out. The longest known bony fish, it can reach over 10 metres. With its ribbon-like body, silver scales and red crest, it looks every bit the sea serpent sailors once described. Unlike predators, it feeds gently, drifting vertically and swallowing plankton. When oarfish wash ashore, they astonish onlookers with their sheer length, their bodies twisting like silver ribbons across the sand. Their measurements confirm what myth suggested. Serpents do live in the sea, though their lives are less terrifying than imagined. Other confirmed giants include jellyfish like Stygiomedusa gigantea, with bells over 1 metre wide and arms stretching 10 metres. Though rarely encountered, when filmed, they fill the screen with pulsing, ghostly movements. Siphonosaurs, those colonies of smaller organisms working as one, can stretch longer than blue whales, sometimes over 30 meters. They are fragile, delicate, and yet among the longest living things on Earth. Their measurements challenge our ideas of individuality itself, showing that a colony can function as a single being of immense size. And then there are the whales, the most measured giants of all. Blue whales, at up to 30 meters and over 200 tons, are the largest animals ever to exist. Sperm whales, at 20 meters, are the largest predators. We know their lengths, their weights, their habits. Yet even so, the scale is hard to comprehend. To stand beside a blue whale skeleton is to feel small in a way that numbers alone cannot capture. To hear its call carrying across oceans is to recognize that measurement does not diminish awe, the facts only deepen it. These giants we've measured remind us that the line between myth and reality is thin. For centuries, people spoke of enormous squid, sea serpents, and monsters. Science has now confirmed that many of those stories contained kernels of truth. The creatures exist. They are real, immense, and stranger than fiction. Measurement gives us certainty, but it doesn't erase the mystery. Because for every giant we've confirmed, there may be others still waiting. The ocean is vast enough to hide more, and history suggests that sooner or later more will emerge. Measuring these giants also connects us to them. To know their length, their weight, their anatomy, is to bring them into our world of data and knowledge. But it's worth remembering that their reality does not depend on our measurements. They lived before we found them, and they will live long after. Our role is only to glimpse them, to record them, and to wonder. The rest of their story unfolds in darkness, far from human eyes. What makes this even more compelling is the thought of scale. For us, a 2-meter fish is a giant. For a whale, it's prey. For the ocean itself, a 30-meter blue whale is just one more creature in its vast expanse. Size is relative, and in the deep, our sense of proportion often fails. A jellyfish the size of a person, a squid longer than a bus, a shark older than empires. All of these defy our usual categories. Measuring them helps, but it doesn't make them less astonishing. And so, as we reflect on the giants we've measured, we naturally turn to those we haven't. For every squid captured, there are others only glimpsed. For every whale recorded, there are sounds that remain unexplained. The deep still hides shapes and shadows we cannot confirm. From the certainty of what we have measured, our thoughts drift back to mystery, to the unconfirmed giants that linger in stories, sonar blips, and fleeting sightings. For as long as people have sailed the seas, they have carried more than food and cargo with them. They have carried imagination. The ocean, with its vast horizons and unfathomable depths, has always been a canvas onto which human beings project their fears and hopes. For every giant we've measured, for every squid, shark, or whale confirmed by science, there are dozens of others born not from the water, but from the mind. These are the monsters of imagination, creatures woven out of shadows, sounds, and half-seen shapes, kept alive by stories passed from one generation to the next. It's easy to see how these monsters were born. Imagine yourself centuries ago, standing on the deck of a wooden ship in the middle of the night. The sea stretches endlessly around you. The only light comes from lanterns and the stars above. The waves creak against the hull, the wind groans through the rigging, and the black water seems bottomless. Then something moves in the distance, a shape, a ripple, a sound. You can't explain it, an explanation isn't even the point. In that moment, imagination fills the gap, and suddenly the ocean is no longer empty. It's alive with things waiting just out of sight. The kraken is one of the most enduring of these imagined monsters. Norse sailors spoke of it as an island-sized beast, tentacles so vast they could wrap around a ship and drag it under. Fishermen told stories of entire fleets disappearing when the kraken rose to the surface. It was not just a predator, but a force of nature, creating whirlpools that swallowed boats whole. Today we understand that such stories were likely exaggerations of encounters with large squid or whales, but the image remains powerful. The kraken is not merely a squid. It is the embodiment of fear itself, the idea that the sea holds something too big, too powerful to fight. Sea serpents are another recurring monster of imagination. From Scandinavia to the Mediterranean, from the coasts of Japan to the shores of North America, stories of long, snake-like creatures slithering through the waves are nearly universal. Some describe them with horse-like heads, others with dragon-like spines, still others as endless coils that disappear into the horizon. Reports in the 18th and 19th centuries describe entire ship's crews seeing them. In some cases, the descriptions line up with real creatures like oarfish. But in most, the monsters grew in the telling, becoming longer, stranger, more terrifying with each retelling. The serpent is an ancient symbol of chaos, and in the ocean it found its perfect home. Mermaids too belong to this realm. Unlike krakens and serpents, mermaids are not monstrous in form but in temptation. Sailors told of half-human, half-fish, beings who lured men with beauty or song, leading them to wreck on the rocks. Some of these tales may have been inspired by sightings of manatees or dugongs, glimpsed from a distance and misinterpreted, but their staying power lies not in biology, but in psychology. Mermaids reflect loneliness, longing, and danger, themes as much about the human heart as about the sea. They are monsters not of teeth and tentacles, but of desire and imagination. Then there are creatures even stranger, like the umibozu of Japanese folklore, a giant shadowy figure that rises suddenly from the calm sea to capsize ships, or the Lusker of Caribbean legend, a half-squid, half-shark hybrid said to drag swimmers into blue holes. These beings never existed in any biological sense, but they reveal how cultures used imagination to give shape to the unknown. Every coastline invented its own monsters, tailored to local fears and environments. The ocean itself provided the stage. Imagination provided the actors. What makes these monsters fascinating is not whether they were real, but what they reveal about us. They show how the human mind works when faced with mystery. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and when patterns are absent, we invent them. A floating log becomes a serpent. A whale becomes a leviathan. A patch of glowing plankton becomes the eyes of a beast. In doing this, we turn fear into story, something we can share, remember, and pass down. Imagination transforms uncertainty into culture. Even today, these monsters haven't disappeared. They live on in literature, art, movies, and games. From Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Seas to modern blockbusters, the ocean monster remains a favourite theme. The kraken rises again and again, not because we believe in it literally, but because it represents something larger. It represents the unknown, the uncontrollable, the reminder that the world is bigger than us. Every generation reinvents these monsters for its own purposes, making them symbols of whatever fears or wonders dominate the age. Science hasn't erased them either. In some ways, it has made them stronger. When the giant squid was confirmed, it was as if the kraken had stepped out of myth into reality. When oarfish were filmed alive, sea serpents became more plausible. Every real discovery breathes new life into the imagined ones, keeping the line between myth and reality deliciously blurred. We know the monsters aren't real in the way sailors once believed, but part of us still wants them to be. The ocean feels bigger, stranger, more alive with them in it. This raises an interesting thought. Do we need monsters? On land, we have long outgrown dragons, yet we keep telling stories about them. In the ocean, we keep imagining krakens, serpents, and mermaids even as science explains them away. Perhaps monsters are not optional but essential. They give form to the unknown. They let us grapple with fears that would otherwise remain formless. They keep us humble, reminding us that we do not know everything and never will. In this sense, monsters are not mistakes. They are tools, ways of navigating a world too vast to fully comprehend. The monsters of imagination also connect us across time. A sailor in the 15th century telling a tale of a serpent that rose from the sea was doing the same thing we do today when we share a story about an unexplained sound or a blurry video of a strange shape. We may have better technology now, but our minds are wired the same way. We see, we wonder, we imagine. The monsters that result are less about the sea itself and more about the human response to it. They are cultural fossils, revealing how people felt about the unknown in different eras. When we think about monsters of imagination today, it's tempting to dismiss them as superstition, but they are more than that. They are evidence of creativity, resilience, and the need to make sense of the world. In a way, they are as important to the story of the ocean as the real animals are. Without them, the sea would be just water and fish. With them, it becomes a stage for drama, mystery, and awe. And even as we measure real giants, the imagined ones remain. They lurk in stories, in the way we talk about the ocean, in the metaphors we use. We still speak of being swallowed by waves, dragged down by currents, ensnared by sirens. These are echoes of the monsters that came before, showing that imagination is as much a part of the sea as salt or tides. As we leave these creatures of the mind, it's natural to turn back to the creatures of flesh. Because for every monster invented by sailors, there are real animals whose size, shape, and behaviour stretch the limits of belief. From imagination, we move back to reality, to the unconfirmed giants still waiting to be discovered, shapes on sonar, fleeting shadows on cameras, sightings without proof. The monsters of imagination prepare us for the possibility that some of them may yet be real. When we talk about exploring the deep ocean, it's easy to imagine that technology can take us anywhere. After all, we've sent people to the moon, rovers to Mars, probes to the edge of the solar system. Surely the ocean, here on our own planet, should be easier, but the truth is the opposite. The deep sea is still more mysterious to us than outer space, and the reason is simple. Our machines are limited. For all our advances, the abyss resists us. Pressure crushes, darkness blinds, cold slows everything, and distance stretches farther than we are willing or able to go. Consider pressure first. At the surface, we live at 1 atmosphere, about the weight of the air pressing down on us. Every 10 meters you descend in the ocean adds another atmosphere. By the time you reach 1,000 meters, the pressure is 100 times greater than at the surface. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, nearly 11,000 meters deep, the pressure is over 1,000 times what we experience here. It's the equivalent of several elephants standing on every square inch of your body. No human could survive it unaided, and no machine can withstand it without extraordinary engineering. Submersibles that go that deep are rare, expensive, and fragile. The Trieste, which carried Jacques Picard and Don Walsh to the Challenger Deep in 1960, was a marvel of its time, but it made the descent only once and could not stay long. Decades later, James Cameron's Deep-Sea Challenger repeated the feat, descending solo to the same depths, but again the visit was brief. Our machines can go there, but they cannot stay. They are not yet capable of long-term study at the deepest levels, and so most of what happens there remains unseen. Even in shallower depths, the challenges are immense. Remote-operated vehicles, or ROVs, are tethered to ships above, limited by their cables and by the endurance of the people controlling them. Autonomous vehicles, untethered, can roam more freely, but their batteries and navigation systems still limit them. Every dive costs money, time, and effort. Compared to the vastness of the ocean, our explorations are pinpricks. We have mapped the moon in greater detail than the seafloor. For most of the abyss, our knowledge is a blur, lines on charts drawn by sonar sweeps rather than direct observation. Darkness adds another limit. Cameras require light, but artificial lights attract or repel creatures, changing their behaviour. Red lights can be used to minimise disturbance, since many deep-sea animals cannot see red wavelengths. But even then, we are intruders, our presence altering what we observe. Bioluminescence shows us some of what lives there, but only fleetingly. For every glowing creature we capture on film, countless others pass by unseen, just outside the cone of our cameras. Cold is another challenge. In the deep, temperatures hover just above freezing. Machines must be built to endure those conditions for long periods without failing. Electronics, hydraulics, and batteries all struggle in such environments. Even when we succeed, the harshness of the abyss means that repairs are difficult, replacements costly, and failures common. Every expedition risks losing equipment to the deep, swallowed by a place that does not give things back. Distance, too, defeats us. The ocean is vast beyond imagination. Covering more than 70% of the planet, its average depth is 4 kilometers. Even if our machines were perfect, we could never observe all of it in detail. The scale is too immense. At any given moment, we are seeing only a tiny fraction, and what we miss may be far greater than what we record. That's why new species are discovered almost every time scientists explore a new area. The deep is not barren, it is abundant, but our machines touch only the edges of that abundance. Even the data we gather is incomplete. Sonar can map the seafloor, but at low resolution. Large features, trenches, ridges, mountains, are visible, but smaller details are blurred. Sonar can detect large schools of fish or giant animals, but it cannot always identify them. Shapes appear on screens, shadows and echoes, leaving scientists guessing. Sometimes those shapes fuel speculation about unknown giants, and while many turn out to be whales or schools of fish, others remain unexplained. Our machines show us hints but not clarity. This limitation shapes how we think about monsters. If our machines could see everything, the myths would vanish. But because they can't, shadows remain. A sonar blip could be a whale, or it could be something else. A sound recorded by hydrophones could be ice, or it could be an unknown creature. The limits of technology keep the door open for imagination, just as the limits of human eyes did for sailors centuries ago. And yet, even with these limits, our machines have given us glimpses of the incredible. Cameras have captured giant squid alive, glowing jellyfish drifting like ghosts, siphonophores stretching longer than whales. ROVs have filmed gulper eels expanding their mouths like balloons, anglerfish waving their lures, and viperfish snapping their needle-like jaws. Hydrophones have recorded the booming calls of blue whales and the clicks of sperm whales echoing through the dark. Each success reminds us what is possible, but each also reminds us how rare these encounters are. The limits are not just physical but human. Funding for deep-sea research is scarce compared to space exploration or medical science. Few nations invest heavily in it, and the expeditions that do happen often focus on resources, oil, minerals, fishing, rather than pure discovery. The abyss is expensive to visit, and its rewards are not always immediate. For scientists, this means working within narrow opportunities, making every dive count and knowing that much will remain unseen. These limits matter because they frame our relationship with the deep. We imagine it as mysterious and full of monsters partly because we have no way to prove otherwise. Every time we drop a camera and see something unexpected, it confirms that the unknown is real. The limits of our machines are not failures, they are reminders that we are small, our tools imperfect, our reach short. The deep is not easily given to us. It must be earned, and even then, only in fragments. But perhaps there is value in those limits. Complete knowledge might rob the ocean of its wonder. Part of what makes the abyss compelling is precisely that it resists us, that it holds its secrets close. The monsters of imagination live in the gaps left by technology. The mysteries remain because our machines are not yet powerful enough to erase them. And maybe that's as it should be. Still, we push forward. Engineers build stronger submersibles, longer-lasting batteries, better cameras. Scientists develop quieter sonar, more sensitive hydrophones, smarter autonomous vehicles. With each step, we close some of the distance between us and the deep. But the limits will always remain. because the ocean is too vast, too harsh, too different from the world we know. Even as our machines improve, the abyss will stay one step beyond us. And that brings us back to the giants themselves. For all the challenges, we have managed to glimpse some of them, to measure them, to confirm they are real. Others remain unconfirmed, lingering in the space between fact and imagination. From the limits of our machines, the story moves naturally to the creatures we suspect but cannot prove. The giants hinted at in sightings and sonar, but not yet captured. They are the unconfirmed giants. The ones that remind us why the abyss still feels like a place of monsters. For all the talk of shadows, sounds and machines limited by the pressure of the abyss, there are still those moments when we break through and come face to face with the giants themselves. These encounters at the edge are rare, fleeting, and often accidental, but they are the moments that remind us the deep ocean is not empty mythology. It is real, alive, and filled with creatures that rarely let us into their world. Sometimes it's a glimpse caught by a camera. Sometimes it's a specimen hauled up in nets. Sometimes it's a meeting through the glass of a submersible window, as if two worlds are staring at one another. These encounters are treasures, small moments of connection between human curiosity and the abyss. One of the most famous came in 2004, when Japanese researchers managed to photograph a giant squid alive for the first time. For centuries, the squid had been known only from carcasses and fragments, but no one had ever seen one alive in its natural environment. Scientists had tried for decades, lowering cameras, baiting waters, hoping for luck. Finally, off the coast of Japan, it happened. The images were grainy but unmistakable. A squid stretching several meters long, tentacles trailing, eyes reflecting the faint light. It wasn't attacking a ship or dragging sailors under. It was simply alive, moving as it always had in the darkness, now caught for the first time on film. That single encounter shifted the giant squid from legend to fact in the public imagination. In 2012, the achievement went even further. A team using a specially designed submersible managed to record high-definition video of a giant squid in the wild. The footage showed a golden, shimmering animal, its arms curling and uncurling as it swam. For the scientists watching, it was breathtaking. Here was a creature that had lived in rumour for centuries, now undeniably alive before their eyes. It was not monstrous in the way sailors once described, but neither was it ordinary. It was both stranger and more beautiful than expected, a reminder that reality often surpasses myth. Other encounters have been less deliberate. Fishing vessels have occasionally hauled up colossal squid, pulled accidentally from the depths. The most famous was in 2007, when a New Zealand crew found one tangled in their lines near Antarctica. When scientists examined it, they were stunned. The squid was massive, its body thick and heavy, its hooks sharp and menacing. At nearly half a ton, it was unlike anything they had studied before. Seeing it in the flesh confirmed that the ocean still hides animals of extraordinary size, animals that rarely, if ever, reveal themselves to us. Submersibles have added their own share of encounters. Pilots describe seeing enormous jellyfish drifting past, their bells pulsing slowly, their arms trailing like ribbons. They speak of siphonophores stretching longer than their vessels, delicate chains glowing faintly in the dark. They report strange shapes that pass just at the edge of the lights, too far to identify, leaving them wondering what they saw. Each encounter is a reminder that, in the abyss, scale is relative. What seems small in one context becomes vast in another, and what seems clear in a photo is overwhelming in person. Sometimes encounters happen not through sight but through sound. Hydrophones have picked up clicks from sperm whales so powerful they can be felt in the body, a physical reminder that these animals dominate the deep. Researchers diving with whales have described hearing the clicks grow faster and louder as the animals approach, surrounding them with invisible pulses. To experience that is to realise that we are guests in their world, that they sense us far more clearly than we sense them. There are also chance encounters near the surface, where deep-sea creatures sometimes stray. Oarfish washing ashore have startled beachgoers, their long silver bodies twisting like serpents. Giant isopods have been brought up in deep nets, their alien forms resembling monsters from science fiction. Even small glimpses, a jellyfish glowing near the surface at night or a strange fish caught unexpectedly, remind us that the deep occasionally rises to meet us. What makes these encounters so powerful is not just what we see, but how little we expect them. Most of the time, the deep ocean remains hidden. We study it through sonar, through fragments, through speculation. When something does appear, alive, massive, undeniable, it feels like a gift. It collapses the distance between myth and reality. The kraken becomes squid. The serpent becomes oarfish. The monster becomes an animal, and the animal is no less astonishing for being real. For scientists, these encounters are data, but they are also emotional. Watching a colossal squid's eye staring back at you, larger than your own head, is not a neutral experience. Seeing a siphonophore longer than a whale drifting silently past your submersible can leave even the most trained observer speechless. These are moments when science and wonder meet, when measurement and imagination overlap. They remind us why we seek the ocean in the first place, not only to know, but to feel awe. There is also humility in these meetings. Every encounter emphasizes how rare they are, how much we miss. For every giant squid photographed, countless others passed unseen. For every siphonophore filmed, thousands drifted through the dark without us. Our glimpses are tiny windows into an ocean of life far larger than we can comprehend. Encounters at the edge don't just show us what's there, they remind us how much more there must be. And sometimes the encounters hint at mysteries still unresolved. Submersibles have recorded fleeting shapes too fast to identify, enormous shadows that slip away before the cameras can focus. Sonar has detected blips that don't match known species. Fishermen have reported pulling up creatures never seen before, only for them to disintegrate before scientists could study them. Each story adds to the sense that the deep still has surprises waiting, that our catalogue of giants is far from complete. For humans, these encounters also serve as cultural touchstones. They inspire headlines, documentaries, books, and stories. They fuel our fascination with monsters and mysteries. Every time a giant squid is filmed, it reignites the legend of the kraken. Every time an oarfish surfaces, it resurrects tales of sea serpents. The deep gives us fragments, and we build stories around them, just as sailors once did. The difference is that now our stories are grounded in evidence, but the wonder is unchanged. These moments at the edge of discovery highlight a simple truth. The ocean is not empty. It is alive, filled with giants that we rarely meet, but that shape the world nonetheless. They are not waiting for us, not performing for our cameras. They are simply living their lives, as they always have, while we stumble upon them by chance. To encounter them is to step briefly into their world, to share the darkness for a moment before returning to the surface. And as we think about these encounters, it is natural to wonder what lies beyond them. If these are the giants we have glimpsed, what about the ones we haven't? If a squid longer than a bus can exist unseen for centuries, what else might be moving through the abyss, beyond our cameras, beyond our machines? From the edge of encounters, the story carries us into speculation, into the possibility of giants larger still, waiting in the vast dark for us to imagine them. Every time we confirm the existence of a giant in the deep, a new question emerges almost immediately. If creatures this large exist, could there be even larger ones still? The thought has haunted sailors, scientists, and storytellers for centuries. The ocean is vast beyond comprehension, covering most of our planet and plunging to depths greater than the height of mountains. It would be strange if we had already seen everything. The giants we know may only be the beginning, hints of possibilities still hidden in the dark. The giant squid is a perfect example. For hundreds of years it was thought to be nothing more than a sailor's exaggeration. Then carcasses began to wash ashore, and eventually living specimens were filmed. Now we know they can reach over 12 meters, with eyes the size of dinner plates. But if we were wrong about them for so long, how can we be certain that nothing larger exists? For centuries, no one could prove their reality. Who's to say that today, other species just as extraordinary aren't eluding us? Even whales remind us of this possibility. Blue whales, the largest animals ever known, grow to 30 meters and more than 200 tons. They dwarf even the greatest dinosaurs, yet they feed on some of the smallest creatures, tiny krill drifting in clouds. Their sheer scale shows us that the ocean can sustain immensity. It has before, and it still does. If whales can exist at this size, then perhaps other giants, less familiar, less documented, could thrive in different niches. One argument in favour of larger undiscovered giants is the ocean's vastness. We often underestimate just how little of it we've explored. The deep is not a uniform void, but a complex landscape of trenches, ridges, seamounts, and canyons. Each environment could hide species unknown to science. Submersibles cover only narrow paths, like flashlights moving across a stadium. ROVs and sonar reveal outlines, but not details. The abyss is big enough to keep secrets, perhaps even secrets of enormous size. Another point comes from the scarcity of evidence. We tend to assume that if something large exists, we would have found it by now. But the truth is more complicated. Even the giants we know, giant and colossal squid, are almost never seen alive. They live in regions where humans rarely venture. Most of what we know about them comes from dead specimens or fragments left behind. If we had to rely on direct encounters alone, they might still be myths today. The same could be true of even larger creatures. They may not wash ashore often, or when they do, decomposition may make them unrecognizable. Then there are the sounds. As we've explored before, hydrophones have recorded noises in the ocean that don't match any known species. The bloop, Julia, slow down, all were initially suspected of being biological, though explanations like ice shifting have since been suggested. Still, the fact that such powerful, unexplained sounds exist leaves the door open. If the ocean can produce noises strong enough to be heard across thousands of kilometers, could some of them be the voices of creatures too large for us to imagine? There's also the history of discovery. Over and over, animals thought to be extinct or imaginary have turned out to be real. The coelacanth, rediscovered after 60 million years, the megamouth shark, first identified in 1976 when one tangled in an anchor chain. The giant squid itself, confirmed only in recent decades. Each discovery has reminded us that our knowledge of the deep is far from complete. Each one has expanded the realm of possibility. If such surprises can happen again and again, why not one more, larger still? Speculation about unknown giants has taken many forms. Some imagine even larger squids, longer than buses and bulkier than whales. Others picture unknown species of sharks or fish, relics from ancient times. Still others suggest creatures unlike anything we know, filling niches we haven't even imagined. The lack of evidence is both a barrier and an invitation. It means we can't confirm, but it also means we can't deny. The ocean's silence is permissive. It allows the imagination to roam. At the same time, there are practical reasons to doubt the existence of much larger animals. Biology has limits. Large bodies require immense amounts of energy. Whales sustain themselves on vast quantities of krill, but such abundance is not common in the deep. Giant squids survive because they are efficient predators, but there's no sign of anything much larger feeding on them. For a creature bigger than a blue whale to exist, it would need an ecosystem capable of supporting it, and so far there is little evidence of such. The larger an animal, the harder it is to hide traces of its existence. Scars on prey, remains on beaches, sonar echoes, or accidental captures. None have yet pointed to something beyond what we know, yet doubt does not erase possibility. The deep has repeatedly shown us that life finds ways we don't anticipate. Bioluminescence, extreme pressure adaptations, species that live for centuries, each seemed improbable until we found them. When we say that biology has limits, we must remember those limits are often wider than we imagine. The absence of proof is not proof of absence, it is simply silence, and silence is not the same as emptiness. Culturally, the idea of undiscovered giants serves an important role. It keeps the ocean alive in our imagination. Even in an age of satellites and global communication, we like to believe there are still mysteries. The possibility of larger giants connects us to the wonder that sailors once felt, staring into the dark and wondering what lurked beneath. It ties us to myth, not in opposition to science, but alongside it, reminding us that discovery and imagination are not enemies, they are partners. One pushes the other forward. For scientists, the search for giants is less about monsters and more about ecosystems. Large animals shape their environments. Whales affect nutrient cycles through their feeding and diving. Sharks regulate populations. Squids serve as prey for whales while being predators themselves. If there were creatures larger than any we know, they would reshape the balance of the ocean. Their existence would not just be a curiosity but a revelation, changing how we understand the deep as a whole. Even without proof of larger giants, the search has value. Every expedition, every sonar scan, every hydrophone recording adds to our knowledge. We may not find a creature bigger than a whale, but we will find new species, new adaptations, new surprises. The act of looking keeps the ocean from becoming static in our minds. It keeps it alive, vibrant, and full of possibility. And maybe that's the point. Whether larger giants exist or not, the ocean feels larger because we allow for the possibility. It is the what-if that gives it depth, the thought that beyond our reach something immense might still be moving. The same thought that once gave birth to the kraken and the leviathan now keeps us curious, keeps us humble. As we leave this speculation, our thoughts turn to ourselves. For in wondering about larger giants, we are also reflecting on what we see when we look into the ocean. The abyss is not only a place of monsters or facts, it is a mirror reflecting our fears, our hopes, our imagination. From the possibility of larger giants, the story moves naturally into how the ocean shapes our sense of ourselves, and how in its depths we find not just creatures but reflections. When we look into the ocean, we rarely see it only as it is. We see ourselves in it too. The surface reflects our faces, our skies, our ships, but the depths reflect something else, our imagination, our fears, our hunger for meaning. The abyss is so vast, so unknowable, that it becomes a kind of mirror for the human mind. What we put into it, monsters, gods, mysteries, often tells us more about ourselves than about the creatures that actually live there. Think of the stories we've told. The kraken, the leviathan, the Midgard serpent. These weren't just animals in people's minds. They were embodiments of chaos, danger, and the human struggle against forces too large to control. When sailors stared into black water, they saw more than fish and waves. They saw uncertainty, and uncertainty became a monster. In that sense, the ocean was reflecting their inner world. Their fear of the unknown, their awe of nature's power, their recognition of their own smallness. These were projected outward and then returned as sea serpents and giant squids. The ocean also reflects our hopes. Myths of mermaids and sirens were not only about danger, but about longing. Sailors far from home imagined beauty rising from the waves, voices calling to them in song. These stories were less about the ocean itself and more about human desire for connection, for comfort, for something gentle in a place otherwise so harsh. The ocean, in these stories, became a mirror of loneliness and yearning. Science, too, reflects in this way. When we measure whales, squid and sharks, we're not just gathering data, we're answering questions that matter to us, questions about scale, survival, and possibility. We look into the abyss for facts, but those facts reflect back truths about ourselves. That we are curious, that we want to know, that we are not content to live on the surface, even though the surface is where our lives unfold. The ocean challenges us by being inaccessible, and in response we send machines, submersibles, and ships. It reflects our persistence, our ingenuity, and sometimes our arrogance. There is also the way the deep reflects time. When we find living fossils like coelacanths or frilled sharks, we see not just ancient creatures but a reflection of our own place in history. We realise we are newcomers, recent arrivals compared to these lineages that have endured for hundreds of millions of years. The ocean, in holding these survivors, reflects our own fragility. It shows us that we are temporary, that life has gone on before us and will go on after us. That is both humbling and strangely comforting. The glow of bioluminescence reflects something too, our fascination with beauty. We look at tiny sparks in the dark water and call them magical, even though they are chemical reactions. The ocean reflects back to us our ability to find wonder in survival strategies, to see art in what is simply adaptation. We can't help but project meaning onto the lights, seeing constellations, lanterns, or messages, when in reality they are just lures, defences, or camouflage. The mirror is not perfect. It shows us what we want to see as much as what is actually there. Even the limits of our machines reflect us. They remind us of our boundaries, of how much we don't know. The ocean reflects our limitations by staying hidden, reminding us that we are not as powerful as we sometimes think. At the same time, it reflects our determination, because we keep pushing anyway. We celebrate every new discovery, not just for the creature revealed, but for what it says about us. That we are still explorers, still dreamers, still searching. On a cultural level, the ocean mirrors societies differently. In some traditions, it is a source of abundance, a provider of food and life. In others, it is chaos, a place where storms rise and monsters wait. In some, it is a boundary, marking the edge of the known world. In others, it is a pathway, connecting islands and continents. The same water, the same depths, reflect different values depending on who is looking. It is never just the sea. It is always the sea as filtered through human eyes. For individuals, the mirror is more personal. Standing on a pier at night, staring into black water, some feel peace, others feel dread, some imagine mystery, others see only emptiness. The ocean reflects back whatever we bring to it. That's why it has remained such a powerful symbol across time. Unlike a mountain which we can climb, or a forest which we can walk through, the abyss resists us. It does not let us in easily. It forces us to confront ourselves in its refusal to be fully known. This mirroring extends even to how we think about monsters. The terrifying jaws of gulper eels and viperfish reflect our fear of being consumed. The gentle drifting of jellyfish reflects our capacity for awe. The endurance of Greenland sharks reflects our longing for time, for longevity. The abyss doesn't choose these meanings. We do. We see a squid and imagine the kraken. We see a glowing lure and imagine a lantern guiding us home. The creatures are themselves, but in our eyes they become reflections. Some scientists argue that this tendency can be misleading, that we should strip away the projections and focus only on the facts. But even science is never free of reflection. Our choice of what to study, what to name, what to measure is shaped by our values. We study giants because they fascinate us, because they challenge our sense of scale. We study bioluminescence because it dazzles us, not just because it is efficient. The mirror is always there, even in the most careful experiments. The ocean as mirror also reveals our relationship with mystery. Some of us want to solve it, to banish it with knowledge. Others want it preserved, left unsolved, so that it continues to inspire. Both impulses are human, and the abyss reflects both back at us. It is vast enough to hold answers and mysteries at the same time. We can discover giant squid and still wonder about larger creatures. We can record the songs of whales and still imagine voices we haven't heard. The ocean doesn't force us to choose. It allows both reflection and reality to coexist. And perhaps that is the most important thing the abyss shows us. It reminds us that we are not separate from the natural world, even if we live mostly on land. The creatures of the deep are not metaphors by themselves, but when we encounter them, they become metaphors in us. The mirror works both ways. When we look into the abyss, we see it. When we look long enough, we also see ourselves. As we leave this reflection, our journey turns toward the end of the story. The giants of the deep, real, imagined, confirmed, and speculative, are part of a larger truth. They remind us that the ocean is still wild, still immense, still beyond our complete control. And in recognizing that, we begin to see why these stories endure, why we keep returning to the abyss in our minds and machines. From the ocean as mirror, the story carries us to its closing, where the giants of the deep remain not just monsters, but reminders of the world's enduring mystery. When we reach the end of a journey through the deep, it's tempting to look back and try to fit everything into a single conclusion. But the truth is, the ocean resists conclusions. It does not tie itself neatly into answers or final statements. It is too vast, too complex, too shifting for that. The giants we've spoken of, the squid, the whales, the sharks, the jellyfish, the siphonophores, are not the last word. They are only the latest pieces of a story still unfolding in darkness. And perhaps that is the most important reflection of all. The abyss is not something we will ever finish exploring. It will always remain a place of questions, of awe, of mystery that stretches beyond us. Still, it's worth pausing to consider what we've seen in this journey. We began with the midnight ocean, a place of darkness where light disappears and pressure builds. We travelled through legends and sightings, through jaws that swallow, eyes that glow, shadows as large as whales. We met gentle giants and ancient survivors, creatures that endure by drifting slowly or by carrying the same form for hundreds of millions of years. We marvelled at the glow of bioluminescence, at the strange sounds recorded by hydrophones, at the fragments our machines allow us to glimpse. We weighed the measured giants we can confirm against the imagined ones we cannot, and in doing so, we touched on the thin line that separates myth from reality. Along the way, we discovered something else. The monsters of the deep are never just monsters, they are reflections of us. When sailors told stories of krakens or serpents, they were not only describing what they thought they saw, but also expressing their own fear of the unknown. When myths gave us mermaids or sirens, they were not just about the sea, but about longing and temptation. When modern science shows a squid with tentacles longer than cars or whales that live for centuries, it reflects our hunger for knowledge, our need to measure and understand. The abyss is both itself and a mirror. The giants, real or imagined, remind us of our scale. Compared to a blue whale, we are small. Compared to the age of a Greenland shark, we are brief. Compared to the history of a coelacanth, our civilizations are barely moments. These comparisons do not diminish us. Instead, they place us in a larger story. They remind us that life is not limited to what we know, that survival takes many forms, and that we share this planet with beings stranger and older than we often realize. There is also something to be said for the way the abyss humbles us. In a time when we like to think we've mapped everything, controlled everything, measured everything, the deep remains beyond us. We have not explored most of it. We have not seen most of its creatures. Every expedition brings surprises, and every surprise reminds us that we are still beginners here, that humility is valuable. It keeps us curious. It keeps us looking. It prevents us from believing that the world is smaller than it really is. And perhaps that is why stories of sea monsters endure. We could let them go, dismiss them as old myths disproven by science, but we don't. We retell them in movies, books and conversations. We keep the kraken alive in imagination even though we now know of giant squid. We keep sea serpents alive even though we've filmed oarfish. We keep listening to strange sounds and wondering if they might come from something enormous and unseen. These stories remind us that the world is bigger than us, that the ocean has more to say than we've yet heard. They keep mystery alive, even as knowledge grows. For scientists, the closing reflection may be practical. Every discovery adds to our understanding of ecosystems, of food chains, of survival in extreme conditions. Every giant measured tells us about the limits of biology. Every carcass studied tells us about the cycles of life and death in the abyss. Knowledge builds piece by piece, and it is essential. But for the rest of us, the reflection is often less about facts and more about feeling. We may never see a giant squid in person, but knowing it exists changes how we think about the world. We may never descend to the Mariana Trench, but imagining what might live there changes how we see the sea. The deep becomes not just water, but a place of stories, of awe, of humility, and that feeling may be just as important as the facts. Wonder keeps us connected to the natural world. It reminds us that we are part of something larger, something older, something stranger than ourselves. The abyss, with its giants and its mysteries, gives us that gift over and over. Every time we think we've reached the limit of discovery, it shows us something new. Every time we think the monsters are only an imagination, it reveals another creature that proves us wrong. Closing reflections are not endings then, but reminders. Reminders that the deep is still out there, alive, vast and full of secrets. Reminders that the monsters we imagine are not separate from the monsters we find. Reminders that exploration is not about finishing, but about continuing step by step, dive by dive, story by story. The abyss will never be finished. It will always be waiting, holding more giants in its silence. And as we leave this journey, it's worth asking yourself one more question. The next time you stand by the sea, what will you see reflected there? Will it be fear, wonder, curiosity, humility? The ocean doesn't choose. It only reflects back what you bring to it. But somewhere beneath that reflection, in the darkness below, the giants are still moving, unseen but alive, keeping the mystery alive for anyone willing to look into the abyss.